my desk is covered in glasses and iPhone cases.
It's that time of year, apparently.
I saw a picture of you in one of those pairs of glasses. I have notes.
Okay. For the record, I thought they looked pretty good, but apparently I'm wrong. So what should I have said, John?
I mean, it's hard. I'm not one of those people who can look at a picture and know what focal length the lens was that took it. So maybe it was like kind of a wide angle thing, but it looked a little bit too big for your face.
I mean, it's just the iPhone front camera, whatever that is.
I mean, that is kind of wide angle, so I could have been fooled by the angle. But I mean, although I have to say, disclaimer, we've been going to the eye doctor frequently because we're swapping glasses for the kids, and every time I'm there, I try on like every single pair of frames in the entire store. Not that I'm there to get them, but I'm like, here I am. I'm going to try them all on. And every single one of them I think is too big for my face. So it could just be that the current trend in glasses disagrees with the way I think glasses should look on someone's face.
Well, I'll tell you here. I'll send you this other one. This is the really big ones.
Oh my!
That's obviously too big. But
yeah, that's one of the pairs I got today. And then these are the ones.
I mean, you like me have a narrow face, so it's almost like you might be better off shopping in the kids' glasses section or the women's glasses section, where I frequently have to go to find glasses that I think look reasonable on my skinny face.
That second one. I'm sorry, this is not good podcasting content, but the second one is very big Steve Jobs energy, just huge Steve Jobs energy right there.
And also the glasses. All these glasses, unfortunately, make you look older, which is not the look you're going for. But
yeah, thanks. Anyway, and so, well, I mean, here I have right here the Steve Jobs glasses.
I mean, yeah, of those three, you made the right choice for sure.
Here, I'll take a picture of the ones that are actually the Steve Jobs frames. Hold on. These will have to have podcasting headphones in them.
I do like that you found some frames that are like one of my pair of glasses don't have the frame around the bottom and just have the little string. I love those, but they're very rare these days because they're not in style, apparently.
Wait, what do you mean by the little string?
So they're not. If you took the lenses out of those glasses, they wouldn't be like a metal hoop where you expect the lens to be. It would be just like a U shape.
Right. Oh, is there like a string that goes along the bottom?
Yeah, there's like fishing line basically.
Oh, I don't think
so. The lenses don't fall out.
Gotcha. Well, I just assumed they were like glued in or something like that.
No, it's just fishing line kind of stuff.
All right, these are the actual Steve Jobs glasses.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean those are good for costume, but
yeah. I mean, they don't have real glass in them. This is like the plastic things that came with them. Anyway, so
we're gonna have to edit all that out. This is terrible podcasting content.
I know. So I've learned a few things so far about. So we had so many people write in and tell me what to get with glasses. So thank you very much to all of you. Now I actually have had a chance to try some of them. And keep in mind, my quote prescription is merely a 0.75 reading glasses. That's it. There's no distance or other there's no other prescription. So like all the other squares in the prescription are empty. Just that little add column says plus 0.75. So these are just readers, and I don't need anything else. So that obviously changes certain things about what's good and what's not. The frustrating thing I'm finding is that if I could just wear a pair of glasses that would just fix my range of vision in all ways.
That's not a thing for old people. Sorry.
Yes, I've learned that. Thank you. But so that's the frustration is there is no way seemingly to fix this all the way. And so I have to either see things far or see things close, but not at the same time.
If you could get some of those, what do they do? Where they take the blood of very young people and inject them into old people to restore their youthful vigor and to make your eyeballs more flexible.
Sounds like a Silicon Valley joke.
Yeah, no, it's totally it's a thing that rich people do because they think it works. But no one has corrected me so far in my theory about the stiffening eyeball thing. So I'm just going to assume it's correct. But anyway, yeah, getting old sucks.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
it does.
The what I have found is that for actual reading glasses, I have the nice pair from the eye doctor, and I have some cheapos from Amazon, and they're not that different. Actually using reading glasses to read things close up is amazing. Oh my God. It's like I love browsing my phone with the reading glasses on is incredible. It's
like having HD again.
Oh my God. It's like going Retina again. It's incredible. I guess maybe that's where they got it from. So
oh, I got it.
But yeah, so anyway, the downside is, of course, that then you can't see anything far away because then it blurs. And so I did get from one of the cheapo online places, on someone's recommendation, I got two different things. I got an intermediate set, which is kind of like reading glasses, but the focal range is a little bit further out. and so it's meant to be like for computers. Now, I found this was pretty good for using a laptop, like in your lap, but at my desktop setup, my monitor is too far from my face to it's out of the focal range of the intermediates. So actually, if anybody out there has any idea, like, does anybody make a pair of intermediate readers where the focal distance is like customizable or like a little bit further out than the regular ones?
I mean, you can just ask your eye doctor for that. Like, what I'm wearing now are my computer glasses, and I told my eye doctor I want a pair of glasses. Here's where I'm going to use them. I'm going to use them at my computer. Here's how far away my monitor is. Get me glasses that let me see my monitor perfectly. And that's what I'm wearing right now, right? Can't drive in them, but like you can just tell them that, and you will get a prescription for whatever that is for your eyeballs. But in terms of finding off-the-shelf ones that work with that, lots of people wrote in to suggest that they basically sell computer glasses, but they all probably have some assumptions about how far screens are from people. And I think when people think computer nowadays, they probably mean laptop. I mean, who has a desktop? What kind of weird people have desktops?
Exactly.
Right?
like, and that's why like these intermediates are perfect for laptop distance, but I'm almost never working that way. So, and for my actual desktop monitor, it's just too far out. The good news is that one of the ones I got is a progressive that goes from nothing to reading. That is actually more interesting. Because that's like the one thing that like, okay, if I had to wear one pair of glasses all the time to correct everything, that's what I would do.
If you want the whole world to look like Jell-O all the time, progressives may be for you.
Well, but you know, like right now, only needing the 0.75, like it's just not worth it.
Yeah, it's not big.
But you know, so what I can see myself doing is like in the future, as this gets worse, as I get older, then I will probably start wearing progressives for that reason, like more, you know, closer to full time. Whereas right now, I don't really need to wear them full time. But and when that does happen, I can definitely see myself maybe like making some changes to my monitor situation, because the problem with the progressives is
you gotta point your nose in the air when you use the computer.
No, it's the opposite. I have to like look down a little bit over the blurred range, because the bottom range is for stuff that's closer than my monitor.
It's too close, right?
So so I have to look through only the top, which means like the bottom, you know, fifth of my monitor is blurry if I'm looking straight at it.
Again, if you get prescription progressives, you can tell the doctor what ranges you want to see through what part of your glasses, and they can do that for you.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's it was really nice. Like when I have the progressives on, it's really nice to be able to like, you know, bring like a soda can close to me and read the ingredient label, like, you know, really close. Like it's nice to have that, you know, and that's when you like tilt your head up and you're, you know, like you're peering down through the bottom half or whatever. But yeah, so it's okay, but I'm glad I'm learning more about this world with very inexpensive, you know, online brand sunglasses or glasses rather, and kind of getting a feel for what I actually will work with when my needs get more severe, where I actually have to address this all the time. But right now, I don't have to address it all the time, and so I'm probably going to only use these occasionally. Like, you know, I'm keeping the pair that I got from Editor. I'm keeping them next to the bed. And that way, like when I'm reading my phone at night in bed, I can put them on, and man, that's awesome! Like it's so great. But then, you know, when I'm at my computer, I'm still not right now. I'm not having any trouble seeing my monitor, so you know, right now it's fine. But you know, over time,
well, it's so damn big. How could you?
Right?
No, but the pixels are small.
Yeah,
fair. So I'm genuinely wondering why not pull like a Jeffrey Wright and look over the top of like he has regular size glasses, but like get one of those like half frame like 70-year-old man reading glasses and just look over the top for everything except reading. Like is that not something that would work for you?
Talk about making you look old though.
Yeah,
well, that's true.
I mean, I have some, you know, self-respect. Like I can't, I'm not going to do any option that I can't say that looks good. And fortunately, my face is compatible with glasses. Like I can put glasses on and they look fine. And I can even probably find some that look great. I don't know, but you know, I have to stay within modern fashion to some degree.
Those little have glasses are modern fashion for senior citizens. You just got to get one of those the strings that go on them around your neck. You know.
Well, if I didn't care at all about fashion, I would get those ones that clip together with a magnet in the middle.
Yeah,
and you like drop them down like over your wear them as a necklace, and then you pop them up. You know, because those are that's the most functional.
Yeah, when they're like safety glasses too, they protect you from, you know, things coming up from the saw.
Yeah, exactly.
You could be worse. You could. I mean, what I do, because my vision is the opposite of yours, I'm constantly looking under my glasses, which looks ridiculous. Instead of looking over your glasses where they slide down your nose, imagine you have glasses, you're sweaty, they're sliding down your nose, and you're craning your neck to look under them so you can see close-up things, because that's what I have to do half the time with my glasses. It's actually not that bad with my little skinny, like, driving glasses, because they're super distance, and if I need to look at my phone, I cannot look through the lenses at all to see my phone, so I look underneath my lenses at the phone. That works out pretty well. If you go into the supermarket or whatever and you need to look down at your phone, it's probably down low anyway, so I can stay looking straight ahead and look down below my lenses at my phone, which I can see. Anyway, yeah, I'm not looking forward to the day when I have to get either bifocals or progressives, because my wife just got progressives, and I look through hers, and her prescription is like not as bad as mine. And boy, I obviously it's a thing you get used to, right? But you can get used to anything. I just asked, but like, I don't know if I can handle progressives at my prescription. Bifocals almost seem like they'd be better, because I just feel like I was wearing 2 pairs of glasses on my face. But I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. For now, I'm just eternally swapping glasses. Driving, not driving. Driving, not driving. It's fine.
Do you want to talk about iPhone cases, or do we want to save that for another time?
Yeah, let's do it. So I just have a quick update. I finally got in the 2 cases that people all recommended to me for the last year, and I just didn't get them for the iPhone 13 for whatever reason. The Pitaka and the Peak Design. These are 2 extremely well-regarded case options. This is the Pitaka Mag Easy Case 3. So it's their newest, thinnest, MagSafe compatible case for the 14 Pro. And the Peak Design, they have this system where they have this little like square mount in the back. So it is MagSafe compatible, but then also they have their own line of like mounts and custom chargers and things that can latch into this square, ridgy kind of mount hole in the back. And so you can actually have really strong mounting options, like for if you're putting it on a bike or a motorcycle or something, like where you MagSafe is not really strong enough for that kind of use. So Peak Design sells this whole line of stuff. So anyway,
wait, hold on. I'm sorry. The Pitaka Mag Easy case. Mm-hmm. Does it look like what I'm seeing on the website? Because
like carbon fiber.
Yeah, like, you know what, everyone got upset about the Mac Pro because of that thing where you don't like holes or whatever?
Yep.
I'm getting this, like, and I don't care about the Mac Pro in every regard, but like that the look of it never bothered me. In fact, I think it looks kind of cool. But this case, I'm getting like major angst over this. I don't like this at all. Like, it is a fake carbon fiber. This is
well, no. It's actually, I think it's actually real carbon fiber. So,
is it? Okay.
That's what Aramid is, right?
I have no idea.
I think it is. Anyway, so we'll go Pitaka first. So the Pitaka case, I've only had it on for a few days so far. It works the best and looks the worst.
I could buy that. I could totally buy that.
It looks like, it is, as far as I think it's actually real carbon fiber, but because fake carbon fiber is so often used as a decoration element in lots of things, it just looks like fake carbon fiber. Like, it looks cheap as a result of that.
Yeah, this does not look good.
Like, I wish I would, and they have these alternating colors. I have the black and blue one. I wish they would just do like a solid color option, because like if what you want is a solid color, they don't offer that. So the gray one is close, but it's not. So anyway, it doesn't look great. It is a very, very minimal protection kind of case. It is a very thin and lightweight case, and rather than like having its own button covers or having holes for the buttons, it has these huge cutouts of the case where like the entire button area on each side, the case just kind of cuts around it. So you are directly pressing the phone's buttons, which in some ways is nice, in some ways is not, because you still have the ridge to contend with your finger. It does have a mostly open bottom, so John could mostly be okay with it. Overall, though, the major upsides of this are it's very thin and light. It feels not that different from having a bare phone in terms of size and bulk, and it has a very good amount of grip on and for the tackiness of the surface. The downsides are it does not look good. It does not provide much protection, and the camera, there's like a plastic ridge to protect the camera area on the back, and it feels really cheap and sharp. That's the biggest downside, I think, is like that camera area just feels crappy. I like this case. I don't know if I'm going to keep it on the phone long term. I'm going to live with it for a while and see what I think. The Peak Design case, definitely looks the nicest of all the ones I have. I would say the Peak Design case probably looks, it's probably one of the best looking, if not the best looking non-leather case that I have seen.
This is the everyday case for iPhone, and it looks like it's almost like a cloth on the back, or like a fabric.
Yeah, it's like a gray kind of heathered fabric on the back with what I believe is a TPU outer band going around the whole outside of the case, like around the ridge. It totally covers the buttons. It has a closed bottom. Sorry, John. The button covers that, and pushing them feels very nice. It's a very high quality case. The ridge around the camera plateau protector is smooth, and it just feels really nice. It looks really nice. The big square mounting hole on the back does not look crappy or bad. It looks tasteful. There is no big in-your-face branding. So the Peak Design looks the best by far of all the non-leather cases I've ever tried. The downside is that back fabric material does not provide significantly more grip than the bare phone would. The sides are a little grippy, it's like a little bit of a rubbery TPU material, not like a silicone, and not like the clear squishy cases that I like. So it's not that much grip is my main problem with it, but it does look and feel good in other ways. Just not a lot of grip, and it's also a fairly thick protection band around the phone. This is obviously if you actually drop your phone, I'd much rather have this on my phone than any of the other ones I've tried so far. But it is a little bit thick for what I'm going for. So I'm not sure I'm going to stick with this either. But if I had a need, and I didn't yet buy any of their mounts or anything, but if I had a need for one of their custom mounts to use this cool square mounting hole in the back, no question, I would go right to this case because those mounts all look awesome. Unfortunately, I don't ride a motorcycle, and I don't need to mount my phone on my bike when I'm driving it to the grocery store. So
you don't want to mount it in the Defender adjacent to the Tide Watch?
I don't need to.
MagSafe would be okay inside a car.
Yeah, it is. It's totally fine. So anyway, so the Peak Design, I don't know if I'm going to have much use for it, but I'm going to keep it around anyway in case I need that mount for something. And the Pitaka does work very well. I'm going to keep it on for a while, but I really don't care for the look. The Apple Clear case I used for most of the last week, and I still don't like how little grip it provides on surfaces. So, if you lay the Apple Clear, I'm hearing you click yours.
Wow, my word, I could hear that too.
Still going strong over here. Just FYI.
But yeah, anyway, I don't love the lack of tackiness on surfaces. If you put it on,
I was going to ask you about the carbon fiber case, because that can't possibly be grippy, can it? It's got to be slick.
It has some kind of surface treatment on it, I think, because it feels like the squishy clear case kind of finish, like that kind of slightly rubbery, kind of tacky feel. So I don't know. I don't know what it's made of. Some kind of resin, aramid, something or other. I don't know. But that for some reason grip surface. But I devised a little test earlier to try to quantify how much surface tackiness it had, where I laid them on a long plank and when I say plank, what I mean is an Apple Watch strap box, because that's what I had nearby. And I put it on the far end, and I slowly kept keeping one side of it down. I slowly lifted the box up like a big seesaw, or like a big lever.
I feel like the camera lump is really going to screw with this test, because what you want to test is the friction of the flat part of it, don't you?
Well, I want to test the friction of the whole thing, because the whole thing is on surfaces. So I held a tape measure up, and I slowly raised up the Apple Watch box as the seesaw, and saw, okay, when does the phone slide down? How high can I raise it before the phone slides down? And so just again, these numbers mean nothing except relative to each other.
You could have done some trigonometry and give us an angle here. Come on.
Well, yeah, I don't have a protractor here. Anyway, so having no case at all.
You don't need a protractor.
Oh yeah, right. I could just do anyway.
Trigonometry.
Yep. All right. So no case at all, 4 inches. The Peak Design, 4.5. Apple Clear Case, 5.5. Pitaka, 6. Apple Silicone, 6.5. So that kind of gives you some idea of the relative grippiness of all of these. Apple Silicone is the most grippy. Unfortunately, it means you can't put it into a pocket easily. And the Pitaka was the second place. And then Apple Clear was third, Peak Design fourth, and No Case was last place.
Having used the Apple Silicone one and a non-Apple leather one, despite the obvious difficulty of pocket, like this is where it highlights how silicone interacts differently with different surfaces, because the inside of your pockets are lined with like whatever cotton fabric, and that's the worst, and they're tight, and that's the worst case scenario for the silicone case. But I find in one of my scenarios, or two of my scenarios where I care about grip, one, being picked up with my hand, and two, being rested on the arm or back of a piece of furniture, or specifically my couches, I find the leather does better in both of those situations. I always found the Apple silicone one ever so slightly more slick and less secure in my hand than the leather one. Just, I don't know, just because of like the, you know, the sweatiness and the break-ininess of leather, where it just kind of starts to be more grippy or whatever. Whereas I think the leather would do worse on your incline test than the silicone, because I think silicone grips better on that very flat surface of cardboard than it feels in my hand. But they're both pretty good in terms of grip. And the clear one, which I've been using since I got my phone, it's pretty good in terms of grip. Like I don't feel like it's super slick. Definitely way more slick than a silicone case or a leather case, but it's not so bad that I feel like the phone is slipping out of my hand. The only weird thing is sometimes when I reach into my pocket, I think for a second, you know, maybe because you mentioned in the last show, did I accidentally face the screen out? No, that's just the back of the case. It feels kind of like a screen.
I will say also, like, I really came to appreciate the look of the clear case with the white phone. I think the darker phone colors, you probably have that the MagSafe ring probably stands out a bit too much against them to look very good on that clear case. But on the white phone, it's not that bad, and I really did appreciate. Like I was at a wedding this past weekend, which we'll get to in a little bit. But so I wanted to look like, you know, I was all dressed up. I wanted my phone to not look too crappy, and I had the clear case, and that's what I used, and it looked fine. Like it looked like a nice piece of equipment. Like the combined look of the clear case with the white phone, it looked nice. It did not look ridiculously out of place with formal wear. You know, it was nice. And I don't think I definitely wouldn't say that about the Pitaka. I think the Peak Design would be the nicest looking option I have, but I didn't have it then.
I would say on the clear case too, the wall that surrounds the giant camera thing on the 14 Pro, it is a wall, and it's, you know, if you don't want a big wall, don't get this one. But it doesn't feel cheap. The wall around it is nicely rounded over.
Agreed.
Right? It's not sharp. It's not flimsy. It is what it is. It's a wall, but I think they did a good job of making it as inoffensive as they could.
Yeah, this Peak one really does look pretty good, but gosh, I do not like the look of the Pitaka at all.
It is very nice feeling in certain ways, but yeah, it's hard to get over that look. We are sponsored this week by Green Chef, a CCOF certified meal kit company. Green Chef makes eating well easy with plans to fit every lifestyle, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, or just looking to eat more balanced meals. Green Chef offers a range of recipes to suit your preferences. Green Chef is also now owned by our former sponsor, HelloFresh, and with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, there is something for everyone. You can pick one or the other, whatever you like. And Green Chef has all these high quality ingredients to make these meals. Ingredients like USDA certified organic ground beef, USDA certified organic chicken, wild caught sockeye salmon, and all these exciting new ingredients, recipes, and delicious meals can support your healthy lifestyle. You can eat well without sacrificing taste. They have their new fall collection. They call it the Fall's Finest. This is a curated selection of farmstead favorites, fresh seasonal ingredients, and premium proteins. And they just have so many options for you. So one of the options they have, besides, keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, they have these things called fast and fit meals. These are under 700 calories and ready in 25 minutes or less. So many different options that you might want with Green Chef. All this comes with pre-made, pre-measured ingredients, spices, sauces, dressings, whatever you need so that you can get more chef-curated flavor in less time. So go to greenchef.com/ATP135 to get $135 off across 5 boxes, and your first box ships free. Once again, greenchef.com/ATP135 and promo code ATP135 to get $135 off across your first 5 boxes, and your first box even ships for free. Thank you so much to Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well, for sponsoring our show.
We have a little bit of housekeeping to do. First of all, for the very last time this year, we're going to ask, nay, beg you to go to stjude.org/ATP, stjude.org/ATP, and throw a few bucks in the direction of kids with cancer and the doctors that are trying to help them. Hey, so here's the thing. If you listen to this show, you are likely to have at least $1 or $2 to scrape together and send in the direction of Memphis, Tennessee to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Why would you do that, you ask? Well, because they do everything that they can to try to cure childhood cancer. And September is National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And we and Relay, especially Relay, get behind St. Jude in order to try to raise money on their behalf. We do that because Relay co-founder Stephen Hackett, a dear friend of all three of us, his eldest son was stricken with childhood cancer at 6 months old. Stephen and his son and his family received literally millions of dollars of treatment from St. Jude and have paid literally nothing for it. If you live in a sane and in a good country, that might be a little bit unremarkable. But for those of us here in the very broken America, that is extremely cool. And you might say to me, well, hey, Casey, I don't care because I don't live in a broken country like America. Well, you should care because St. Jude does a lot of research and they share, I don't know if donate's the right word for it, but they share a lot of that research with hospitals and doctors and whatnot around the world. So you've probably spent a bunch of money on stuff you don't need, and I'm parroting Marco here. I'm taking all of Marco's thunder, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry.
Fair enough.
You've probably bought a bunch of stuff you don't need. I certainly have, and we're going to talk about that soon. So you should, in order to kind of offset that, it's not a carbon offset, it's a frivolous expenditure offset, you should go to stjude.org/ATP, stjude.org/ATP, and donate. The donations are accepted until the end of the month at that address, but certainly feel free to donate anytime you want to St. Jude. We're not going to stop you. And also, with related housekeeping, we have a new leader on the leaderboard in taking over from the entire company of 1Password. One individual, the famous James Neal, who donated something like $7 or $8 grand last year. I forget exactly what the total was, but it was nuts. This year, James Neal, a single human by himself, donated $32,000. He bought a Civic and donated it to St. Jude. $32,000. Actually, that's a really nice Civic. That's probably almost an Accord, isn't it, John? $32,000.
Civic has gotten pretty expensive. It's probably close to the top of the line Civic.
Yeah, it's not quite a Type R, but it's a really nice Civic. So anyway, $32,000.
Yeah, regardless, like the three of us each individually donated a used Camry, and this blows us out of the water. I mean, my God, James Neal is incredible.
He is my hero.
This is incredible.
Get out the sticker cannon.
Yeah, get out the sticker cannon. I actually offered, he never said anything to me. I offered to shoot the sticker cannon in his general direction one more time, and he very politely and very kindly said, I've got plenty from last year.
He's got enough of your stupid stickers.
Exactly. So don't worry about that. But
we'll just order a new production run and have them sent directly to his house.
I really should. But here's the thing. I might have this wrong, but I think last year Relay raised something like $700,000. If I'm lying to you, it's not on purpose, I promise. But sitting here now, we're at $550,000. Let's get to $700, baby. Let's get to $700,000. Do what you can to donate $150,000 in just a couple days. A tall order. I don't know if we're going to make it, but let's try. What's it going to hurt to try? stjude.org/ATP. And that is the last time we're going to talk about that for now. Similarly, last time we're going to talk about something else. ATP Movie Club is back, baby. And we've got one final episode for you, at least for now. And this episode is John's episode. John, would you like to tell us anything about what we have done?
I'm just going to tell you the name of the movie we picked because that's what we do on this show. So this is the third and final movie. And as we talk about in the episode, I had a difficult time finding a movie to pick for these two. What I picked is not one of the things that lots of people have been sending tweets and emails saying, oh, I bet John picked this. I bet John picked this. Nope. I didn't pick any of those things that you were guessing. Nobody guessed this movie, but it's what I picked. I picked Edge of Tomorrow. If you've seen that movie or if you heard me talk about it on other podcasts, maybe that's not surprising to you, but no one guessed it. Everyone was guessing other big name movies. And if you listen to the show, I will explain why I ended up picking what I picked. And then we talk about it.
Yep. So this is just for members as a thank you for sticking around with us all the way through episode 500. And you can become a member at atp.fm/join. Certainly you could and should stay a member forever, but you could do the John thing where you just sign up briefly, get the episodes and leave. But we don't want you to do that. Please. atp.fm/join. All snark and jokes and whatnot, leaving the room for a moment. Sitting here now, I am sure at some point we will do more membership-only content, but we are not planning to make a habit of it. We'll maybe do it like once a year or something. Sitting here now, we genuinely have no even vaguely concrete plans. We have basically no plans at all. We have a bunch of ideas, but no actual plans. And so if you're not in a position where you can sign up for a membership, we totally understand. That's totally fine. And I don't want you to feel like you're missing out on something forevermore. We'll do this from time to time, but for now, we're going to put it to bed and let these 3 episodes live in infamy or something like that.
And at any time in the future, if you become a member, of course, you'll have access to these episodes. So.
That's an excellent point. Thank you, John. That is very, very true. All right, let's do some follow-up. John, can you tell me about shared photo library limitations? This is still in beta, isn't it? I don't think this is in the release version, right?
Right, yeah. And occasionally I update the betas. I updated my Ventura boot disk a little while ago. And I think I talked about this in the past show, but one of the things that had been tripping me up in trying to test the Apple shared photo library thing was my complete inability to create a new Apple ID. Because I needed an Apple, I had gone through this Apple ID purge a while back that I also talked about on the show, getting rid of like a bunch of my testing Apple IDs. I still had one testing Apple ID, which is the one I'm using in Ventura. Like I'm not using my real Apple ID, but I needed another one to be part of my family, so I could do. I guess they don't need to be part of my family. You can share it with anybody. But anyway, I needed another Apple ID that was not a real person that I could share my shared photo library with. I didn't want to share it with any actual people in my family for fear of inducing any bugs. I didn't want anything to touch my real Apple ID until Ventura is done. And I just cannot create an Apple ID. So anyway, we're on beta 6, beta 8, whatever we're on in Ventura. Finally, I was able to create an Apple ID. And by the way, I tried creating Apple IDs outside of Ventura. Tried it on the web, tried it from all sorts of places, and it was just never working for me. Just, I don't know, bad internet weather on the days when I tried it. Apple was having server problems. Whatever the problem was, I'd get halfway through the process and I'd be close to the end and it'd be like, sorry, this failed. And it was no explanation. Anyway, I created a second Apple ID. So now I'm sharing a photo library, and I didn't need to do this test to figure this out. It should have been obvious from our past discussions and the description of the feature, but I just didn't think about it, and it really hit home once I actually did the sharing. Because when I was just doing it by myself, I was like, oh, look, you can toggle any photo if you want it to be in the shared library or in your private library, and you can view both of them merged together, and it's real convenient. That's when I'm just looking at, it's a shared library with one person in it. Once I had a second person, I really see the limits, and I immediately filed a feedback request to say, hey, please improve this. And it was it's not a bug report, it's a suggestion, they call it. They don't call it a feature request, but it's a suggestion. And, if this is the 1.0, fine, good 1.0, but there needs to be a 1.1, a 1.2, a 1.5, and then maybe a 2.0, right? Here's what it's missing. Shared photo library makes it sound like you're sharing an entire photo library, but you're not, because what is part of a photo library? Obviously, the photos are part of a photo library, but there's
albums.
Way more than just photos in a photo library. There are albums, there are smart albums, there are slideshows, there are book projects. That's all part of the library. There's ratings, there's keywords, there's favorites. That's all part of the library. Like, that's a photo library, right? When you share it, none of those things are shared, nor can they be shared. And when I look at my actual family photo library that is owned by my wife's Apple ID currently, we have tons of albums. We have folders full of smart albums. We have all the old book projects that I did. We have slideshows. We have all the metadata, all of the keywords, all the favoriting, all of the ratings, just tons of metadata. None of that is shared. So what that means is, although the main selling point of this feature, which I think is great and I'm going to be excited to have, I'll finally be able to see all of my family's photos on my phone and on my Mac. When I have to go in and basically work with the photo library, I'm still going to be logging into my wife's Apple ID. Because what am I doing when I'm working in the photo library? I am not just modifying pictures, which those would be shared, but I'm marking things as favorites. I'm adding location metadata. I'm putting things into folders. I'm labeling things with keywords. I'm setting person information. None of that is shared, right? The edits to the photos, I believe, are shared, but the other stuff is not. So, good job for a 1.0. Like, you're not going to get everything in the very first version. And the 1.0 looks like it does a really good job of exposing the features that it has. But I really hope that feedback request lands in someone's inbox and they say, oh, yeah, we're totally already working on that for the next version 2 years from now. Please do work on it, because until that comes to fruition, I'm still going to be logging into my wife's account to work on our photo library, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I can understand how they ended up there with not sharing albums and whatnot, but that is kind of crummy.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the name. It says shared photo library. It doesn't say shared photos. Because, yes, you are sharing photos, but the library has tons of stuff in it. And when I'm working with it, it's mostly what I'm doing is working with the metadata. I'm rearranging things, I'm tagging things, I'm organizing things and stuff like that. So I would like to be able to do that from my account, but that is not going to be possible.
Speaking of disappointments, do you want to tell me about Creaky clear cases?
Yeah, people were discussing this in the chat room when I made the creaky noise with my case. Lots of people are experiencing this. Lots of people think it's like, your case must be defective, return it or whatever. It's not defective. Like, if you look at it, like, it looks like it fits perfectly. There are no obvious gaps. It is all even around all the sides. Like, this is a question of micrometers. It is not bulging, deformed, warped. Some people said, hey, did you get the wrong case? Maybe what you got is for the 14 instead of the 14 Pro. It's not the wrong case. It's everything is right. And lots of people were sending feedback, tweeting, emailing, saying, hey, I have the clear case. And it also creaks, right? I think, and some people were saying, I have it, and it doesn't creak at all. It may just be a matter of maybe people don't squeeze their case as much. Maybe it creaks and they don't notice. Like, I don't think there is this big, bifurcation in the production run where half of the cases creak and half the cases don't. I think it's just sensitivity to minor differences in, it's not even differences in fit. Like, because I think it's material, really, because I don't think any case I've ever had from my phone fit any better than this. It's just a question of when it doesn't fit, how does that manifest in the case? And it's this particular kind of clear plastic material that's like tacky and sticky that kind of like clings to the sides of the phone and then releases, making that little noise like that. I think it's the material. I think every case does that, but if it's not made of this material, it doesn't make that noise and doesn't feel as insecure. I don't know. I'll let you know when one or both of my leather cases come in, how they do. Some people also had a theory is because I have the black Pro and maybe the black finish on the stainless steel is prone to this, and it's going to happen with every case I get. I don't know. But anyway, just wanted to let people know that I am not the only person who got the clear case on their iPhone 14 Pro and hears it creaking and doesn't like it.
All right, breaking news from earlier today. Stage Manager will support older iPads, which is very selfishly exciting because I have an older iPad. I have a 2018 era, original iPad Pro with Face ID, and allegedly the Stage Manager will support even my creaky 4-year-old iPad, which actually isn't that creaky and is still surprisingly peppy, as long as I don't use it with an external display, which I think is a perfectly fair trade, to be honest with you, and I'm pretty excited about this.
Not alleged. There's an actual quote from Apple in there, too. And to be specific, it'll be available on the 2018 and 2020 models that use the A12X and the A12Z chips. So if you wanted to know, that's that specifically. But with the limitation that those iPads cannot use external displays with Stage Manager. And then on top of that, in the latest beta of iPadOS 16, they just removed external display support for everybody, even the M1 iPads. That's a temporary condition that will be coming back later. But yeah, the whole Stage Manager situation seems to be not going great. Not going great over there at Apple.
So.
Like they gave, in the press release, they're like, we worked hard to make sure this works on older iPads. We heard your feedback. Well, that's all good and everything. But the feedback from the folks who are messing with every one of the new iPad OS 16 betas on their M1 iPads is that Stage Manager is still a mess. Not only last time we talked about this, we said like, oh, it's a mess because Apple can't figure out how it should work, or like the way they made it work is not pleasing to the users, right? But now on top of that, people are saying, oh, and by the way, also it crashes all the time. So those are two things that are also not good. When it's working, we don't like it, but most of the time it doesn't work and it crashes. So I really hope they figure out this Stage Manager thing and on some reasonable timeline.
Yeah, it's been a mess all summer long. Like I don't know anybody all summer long who has been using Stage Manager and says, this is ready to ship. On one hand, it's fantastic that they have added the support for the older iPad Pros. That's great. That could have saved me $1,000 earlier this summer. Thanks for the timing on that one. But hey, that's great for everybody else. You can have this win over me, everybody. It's better that they're disabling the external display support now than shipping it in as broken of a state as it was in. So I'm glad they're at least like willing to pull something before shipping if it's not working out. I'm surprised Stage Manager is making it into the release at all. Based on the feedback from people who have actually been using it all summer long, it's not a positive overall sentiment out there about Stage Manager. It seems like everyone pretty much says that it needs some significant design and functionality changes before, and reliability changes before it can actually be shippable. And so many of us were thinking they were going to pull Stage Manager entirely before release.
I mean, they might still.
You're right, but seems like this is what they're doing instead of that. And so, okay, we'll see. Maybe, they know better than we do. Maybe things are better than we think they are. I hope, because, what we've heard is not great. But, maybe things are getting better in the last few betas. We'll see.
I have to say, I'm running the latest iPadOS beta on my iPad. It's an M1 iPad. And if you never use Stage Manager, so far it doesn't bother you. just to be clear, this is not a feature that you have to use if you don't want to. Obviously, I mean, it's a headlining feature. You would hope it would work and it would be useful and you want to use it. But after my initial experimentation with Stage Manager, I don't mess with it at all, and it does not affect my life. So it has that going for it, but that's not a great thing to say about it. What's supposed to be a headlining feature of your new OS. Also, do we have a date for? I know they delayed iPadOS 16, but did they have a date, or did they just say fall? Did they say October? I forget what they said for iPadOS 16.
I don't believe we have a date except fall.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. So here's the problem with the whole thing. Like, so they took external display. They said flat out external displays aren't going to work on the older iPads. Maybe that's a RAM limit or whatever, right? But they took it away from all of them. And this is a direct quote from Apple that they sent to, I forget where they sent. This is from Mac Rumors, but this is from Apple. External display support for Stage Manager on M1 iPads will be available in a software update later this year. There's not that much of this year left. And fall, like later this year, like if iPadOS 16 comes out, on December 1st, and it ships with external display support, that would it doesn't say that, hey, we're going to release iPadOS 16, and then after iPadOS 16 is out and released to the public, at some point after that, we'll roll out external display support for M1 iPads. This doesn't say that at all. It just says, will be released in a software update later this year. So I don't know, there's lots of outs in this plan where they could comply with the letter of this law and do all sorts of weird things in terms of external display support, including potentially missing this deadline of update later this year and have it actually it'll be updated, later this spring. Although I feel doesn't seem weird to you that they would pull external display support for the M1 at this point, because Is it crashing because it's running out of RAM? The limitation of the older machines not being able to do external display support makes some sense in terms of resource limits, right? Because you can have more apps running and more windows displayed and stuff like that. But the M1 doesn't suffer from those limits, so why is that part of the feature being pulled at this point? It's mysterious, and I don't understand the motivation behind the changes, but it all just leads to continuing uncertainty about what is this going to look like when it ships to users? And in the current situation, even if they fix all the crashing bugs and they shipped it the way it works today, I think people would be like me and just be happy that they can turn it off and be sad that it didn't turn out better than it did.
Well, I think when you're talking about a second screen, that changes a lot. And yeah, I mean, their iOS has supported secondary screens in the API levels for a while now, but this is, I think, the first case where things can be pretty different in ways that regular people will run into a lot if you happen to have a second screen. And that a lot of apps could get away with making a lot of assumptions about UI screen, .main, that just don't,
Yep.
You just can't do that anymore. That's, I believe .main is actually deprecated in iOS 16 now. And so, all throughout iOS history of software development, both in Apple and in the App Store, devs like us, we've been able to assume that UI screen.main would give us whatever aspect of the screen we were looking for, whether it was the scale to know what kind of Retina level we're talking about, things the different attributes of what's going on with the screen size. We've been able to count on that for all this time being this singleton that we could just refer to and just know things. This external display support with Stage Manager is the first time that assumption is really broken for lots of apps. And so I think by saying that they're going to disable this part right now, regardless of the hardware, that suggests to me this is not about resources, hardware resources. This is about bugs. And so many bugs will and have crop up because of that assumption being broken now for the first time ever in iOS, I think it's going to be a while and a lot more work before that is going to be really reliable. And that's going to be made worse by the simple reality that almost no one, relatively speaking, is going to be doing this. Like almost no users of your app, whatever your app might be, like the percentage of your app's users who are actually going to have an external display with their iPad using Stage Manager is so low that it's not really worth a lot of developers' time to make that work. I mean, look at how many developers even make basic iPad resizing and multitasking work. Not a large number. And when you look at something like this, I mean, odds are low. Anyway, so all this is to say, I have a feeling this is about software bugginess and not hardware resources.
It's a little trivia from, you got all those UI kit folks have all these APIs with UI something in the name. Well, back here on the Mac/Next, all our stuff begins with NS. So you got UI screen.main. Any guess what NS screen.main is on the Mac /Next?
Is it like the dock or something weird?
No, I mean, it's the same thing. They're displays.
Or is it the monitor that contains the dock?
All right, so NS screen.main might seem, well, what's your guess? What is the main screen on your Mac?
Well, on a laptop, it's the built-in one.
Right, but just assume you have a desktop. Like, think about Next, because this is an API from like the Next days. So you have a Next computer. It's got monitors. There's no built-in monitors. There's no Next laptops. So that would be awesome. NanoRaptor, please make me a Next laptop. Yeah, what's the NSScreen.main? I guess you have to be a Mac user for the obvious thing that would come to mind for me is NSScreen.main is the screen with the menu bar, right?
Right.
Of course, modern versions of macOS screwed that up by putting the menu bar on all the screens. Remember when they made that change a while back? It used to be that the menu bar was only on one screen, and in the little displays arrangement, you could drag the little menu bar to different screens to bless one of them.
You can still do that, I think, to set the primary display, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Wouldn't you think that would be NSScreen.main?
I would assume.
Yeah.
But it is not. It is absolutely not. Right? So
no.
To Apple's credit, in the documentation, it says, the main screen is not necessarily the same screen that contains the menu bar. And by the way, the main screen, the one with the menu bar has its origin at 00 with the coordinate system and all that stuff. The coordinate system on screens in the Mac is super weird. Yeah, no, that's not NSScreen.main. Can you guess how you find that? The screen with the menu bar on it? If it's not NSScreen.main?
I don't know. I assume you have to like do some like NS workspace hack or something. I don't know. What is it?
No, NS Screen has a screens plural method that returns a list of all the screens, and the one with the menu bar is the first one.
Oh God,
it's the worst. It's the worst. It's
Neat.
So bad. It does not. Is not what anyone will ever guess. NSScreen.screens.first is the menu bar screen. NSScreen.main refers to the screen containing the window that is currently receiving keyboard events.
Oh, so it changes constantly?
Oh yeah, which makes some kind of sense.
Oh my gosh!
But
oh my gosh!
Not. I mean, you can do everything you need to do with these APIs, but boy, so it makes me wonder. What does UI screen.main refer to in a multi-screen iPad scenario? Is it the screen that is receiving keyboard input?
Well, it's deprecated, like Marco said. There is no UI screen.main anymore for all intents and purposes.
I wonder what the replacement API for that's going to be.
It's terrible. You have to basically go through like the scene manager and all this stuff. It's very like there's no like singleton way to refer to it. You basically have to.
You can't like arrange you can't arrange screens on the iPad, right? It shows I've never used an external screen with an iPad. You can't like do like you can on the Mac where you arrange them like one is like half overlapping with the other on the right hand side and stuff like that.
I would assume you can, but I darned if I know how.
I honestly have no idea. This is something I have screens, I guess I could plug in, but I have never even attempted this.
All right. Speaking of screens, you want to tell me about when the always-on iPhone screen goes dark?
We talked about this last show. Two things having to do with us not liking the always-on screen. One of them was I put it on my nightstand and it's lit up, and we talked about different ways to deal with that in terms of sleep focus and other things like that. And we'll get to that in a second, but Apple has a document on this that we got a link to last time. I think we even talked about it on the show, but I just wanted to read off the items. If you just turn on the always-on screen and don't do anything special to it, there are scenarios where even though you have always-on screen on, the screen will turn off. And what the Apple document says, always-on display goes dark when you don't need it. To save battery life, the display is completely dark when your phone is lying face down, your phone is in your pocket or bag, sleep focus is on, low power mode is on, your phone is connected to CarPlay, you're using continuity camera, you haven't used your phone in a while, parentheses, your phone learns your activity patterns and turns the display off and on accordingly, including if you set up an alarm or sleep schedule. And finally, your phone detects that you moved away from it with a paired Apple Watch. Always on display will turn on when your Apple Watch is close to your phone again. So the phone is trying hard not to bother having its always on screen on when it's pretty sure you're not using it or you're not going to possibly look at it. So kudos for Apple figuring out all that stuff. But then the scenario I was describing doesn't fit any of those except for the sleep focus thing, which if you don't want to use smoke photos, that won't work. And the whole learns your activity patterns. Obviously, I don't have the patience for that. If it would eventually learn my activity patterns, oh well. But the other way to deal with that is black and white always on lock screen. So if you go to settings, focus, select one of your focus modes options, there is an enable dim lock screen option. And when you're in that focus mode, your lock screen will basically be all black, but just with like the time and other stuff in it. I'm not sure if it works with widgets, but this is selectable on a per focus mode basis. It doesn't have to be your sleep focus. You can do this for any focus mode. If you're interested in having a darker lock screen in the always on feature, try that out. Otherwise, you can rely on apparently Apple's smarts to eventually figure out when you're probably not using the phone.
So I went to the Apple Store twice today. First of all, Apple stores, even, not remarkable ones like mine, apparently have the Apple Watch Ultra in stock to look at, or I shouldn't say in stock. They have it available to look at. They have display models. And I very briefly put one on my wrist, and it is freaking mammoth. It is a monster of a watch. I should have taken a picture, but I was trying to accomplish other things, which we'll talk about momentarily. But it was huge. I will say I liked the orange band. I forget what it's called, like the Adventure band or something like that. But I thought that was pretty cool with like the titanium clip in it. I did like that. I didn't really play with the software on the Ultra, but holy cow, it's huge. And I happened to be there with Aaron, and I think I heard this from Marco on one of the recent episodes of this very program, but maybe I heard it from somewhere else. But I said, oh my gosh, this thing is enormous. And Aaron said, I actually don't think it looks that bad. And Marco, I think, had said a couple episodes ago, like, whatever you think when you look down at your wrist, that's not necessarily what everyone else thinks. But oh my gosh, when I looked down, I was like, this thing is 8 sizes too big. It's just ridiculous. Was that you, Marco, or am I making this up?
Yeah, like watch fashion is very personal, and it varies a lot between like who you ask. If you ask the watch world, how big of a watch is too big? Generally, the only thing people can agree on is if the lugs, which on a regular watch are like those little metal things that come up and down from the top and bottom that hold the strap on. So if those extend over your wrist, like on top and bottom, that's generally considered too big. But the Apple Watch doesn't have lugs. It has the strap slots, so it's kind of a different way to look at it. But generally speaking, like whatever watch that you can rock with confidence will look good on you. And so it's basically whatever you think looks good on you, because if you think it looks good, you'll rock it with confidence. So that's how actual watch fashion works, is like if you think you're pulling it off, you're probably pulling it off. And so you can kind of wear whatever makes you feel good, and it'll be fine.
Fair enough.
I've seen a lot of people, all the videos of people wearing the Ultra and everything, and I feel like the design of the watch not excuses, but like explains or makes sensible its size. Because when I see people wearing it, I don't know if I feel like they're using the Pip-Boy or whatever from the Fallout games. Like it's utilitarian, and in the same way I would if I saw someone wearing like a really old Garmin GPS watch ages ago or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, it's big and clunky, but like that's what it has to be to do what it does. And not that the Ultra is big and clunky or anything, but it's just like it looks tool-y enough. You know what I mean? Like it looks utilitarian. It looks I don't know. It looks more like a practical thing that you're wearing for a purpose. Now, granted, I know it's just the same as any other Apple Watch with a bunch of extra features. Like, it's not actually that different. But when I see that, and even like the flat screen, that helps with that. When I see that, I say, oh, I'm no longer judging it as a fashion accessory. I'm now judging it like the same way if you saw someone running and they have one of those like straps to go across their chest for heart rate or whatever, right? You wouldn't like judge that as a fashion accessory and go, oh, I feel like that heart rate sensor is a little bit bulky. Like, it doesn't match their outfit. It's like, no, it's a utilitarian thing. And that's what I think when I see the watch. And so not that I care what watches look like on people or whatever, but like, I think the Apple Watch Ultra looks really good in that role. And, again, maybe it's the flat screen that helps it. I see it as a little computer on the wrist, and I go, hey, that's a cool little computer you got on your wrist. I don't think, hey, that's a giant watch.
But why did I go to the Apple Store, you wonder? Well, I had ordered myself and Aaron solo loops with our new Apple Watch Series 8s. So these are the things that they're made of similar material to the sport band. Not exactly the same, but similar material to the sport band that is like the quintessential Apple Watch band. But they're a little bit stretchier, and there's no like clasp or anything like that. It's just one single piece of this fluoroelastomer rubber, whatever it is. And I actually think they look really good and feel really nice, because instead of having all the lumpiness where you have the band folded over on itself on the sport loop or whatever it's called, it's just a single piece of rubber, for lack of a better way of describing it. And I really do like it. And I had one for my Series 6, and I liked that until it eventually got a crack and then one day split in two, which was a little undesirable, but what are you going to do? So anyway, so when I ordered my Apple Watch and Aaron's Apple Watch, I did the thing where you print out a sheet of paper and you cut out like a faux Apple Watch, like sizing tool. And I tried this, and I tried it with Aaron and tried it with me, and I got it all wrong. I just got it completely wrong. And I had ordered a size 7 for myself, and it turns out that I actually prefer a size 5, so I was not even close. For Aaron, I believe I ordered a size 5, and she needed a 4. So Aaron and I went to the Apple Store because we wanted to just exchange these bands for the exact same thing, but different sizes. I had a vague recollection that this was a nightmare 2 years ago when I had last gotten an Apple Watch and these solo loops were brand new. I had thought that Apple had said, oh, no, we'll fix this. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. Because again, 2 years ago, it was not better. It was quite bad. So I go into the Apple Store and I talked to a very nice person, and I said, I'd like to exchange this. And they said, okay, I'm going to need the watch too. I said, sorry, what? Yeah, because you bought it with the watch, I'm going to need to return the watch. I'm sorry, what now? That's still a thing? Yeah. It's because it's in the system, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I go home and I do what, any privileged person does. I write a moany tweet about it, and a bunch of people, including Marco, replied to it. And Marco confirmed what I had thought, which was, wait a second, didn't they say this got better? And then a bunch of people replied to the two of us saying, yes, they did. In fact, almost exactly 2 years ago, on the 24th of September in 2020, there is a post on TechCrunch where Apple is quoted as having, or it says, Apple has since clarified and addressed some of the issues. For starters, users can now just replace the band rather than the entire watch, either in store or by mail. That's exactly what I want to do. Like, that's what I want. So, okay, fine. So we drive the 15 minutes back home, which is like, as I said to some friends of ours, like, if this is the biggest of my problems today, I'm doing pretty friggin' well. But in the heat of the moment, it's really damn frustrating. So nevertheless, we drive home. I collect her, I take Aaron's watch off of her wrist. I leave mine on my wrist because I figured what's the worst thing? I'll just take it off and hand it to him. I collect the Apple Watch boxes. I put them all back in the foldy thing. So for context here, as of a couple of years ago, when you get an Apple Watch and band, what they do is they take a Apple Watch box that has the watch and the charging cable and nothing else, and then they put that below or above or whatever next to a band box, the same band box you would buy if you just went and bought that band straight out of nowhere. You didn't buy a watch, you just bought the band. It's the same thing. They put both of these together in like this kind of origami papery thing, and then they fold that all up, and that becomes your purchased Apple Watch. It's very clever. But the thing is, that makes me think, why can't I just take the band box and bring it in and return that? Well, oh no, my friend, oh no. So fine. Aaron needed to go pick up Michaela from preschool, so she went off her way. I went back to the Apple Store, and I talked to someone who I think was a little more senior. I said, okay, I'd like to, return or exchange these two. And, oh yeah, I remember you from before. Yeah. So what ended up happening was they didn't need the watches, because the impression they had given me, actually this same fellow had given me earlier in the day, was that I needed to literally return the watch and potentially maybe even get a new one in order to just exchange these bands. I don't want to return the bands. I don't want to do a totally different band. I just want a different size of the same band. So anyway, so I go back to do it, and I have Aaron's watch in the box. I have my box with my watch on my wrist. And I say, okay, I'd like to do these exchanges, please. Oh, well, we don't have I forget the technical term for it, but we don't have a Starlight Blue band. We have a Midnight Blue band. Okay, fine. Can I see that one, please? I bet it looks the same. Sure enough, it looks the exact freaking same, but whatever. But so they bring me the 2 bands that I want, and he ended up scanning a barcode on the back of the Apple Watch boxes, but could not have cared less whether or not there was anything but air in those boxes. It was the weirdest thing. And I feel like Apple has a record of my purchase and the serial numbers associated with my purchase. Like, why are we still doing this 2 years on? Am I the first person to have bought the wrong solo loop? I can't imagine I am. Like, again, in the grand scheme of things, it's fine. But it was just so startling because, Erin's been a little perturbed with some of the things that have been going on with her phone and her watch and whatnot. Like her Series 6, the battery life has just become atrocious over, the span of 2 years. The battery life on her 14 Pro has actually been very disappointing to the point that she turned off the always on display and still is complaining about her battery life as compared to the 13 Pro. So Erin's already fired up about everything. And she keeps saying to me, and she's kind of right, like, what happened to the it just works? We make it easier for the customer. Like, oh, it's just everything is roses and daffodils. Like that's just not the Apple today. And that sucks, dude. Like that's just not cool. And it makes me sad. And again, this in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal. Like it really could be so many ways worse in so many just infinite ways. But I miss the time when, and maybe I'm making this up, maybe it's rose-colored glasses, but I feel like I could go to the Apple store years and years and years ago and know I was going to have a decent experience. Another silly example, when I picked up my phones, or, her phone and my phone, when they were brand new, I got like the real, not a runaround, not like Marco had to do at Staples back in the day, but like, oh, do you want a screen protector? No, I'm good. Are you sure you don't want a screen protector? Yes, I'm fine. Well, if you get a screen protector and we put it on ourselves, then there's like this super fancy guarantee from Belkin or whoever makes. No, really, I promise. I'm okay.
Can I offer you the gold-plated screen protector, which will protect your screen even faster?
Right, exactly. What about, do you want AppleCare? Are you sure you don't want AppleCare? No, really, really, really? Are you really sure you don't want AppleCare? And it's like, on the one side, the complimentary way of looking at this is they're just trying to help me out. Like, and I could make a solid argument that that's legitimately what they were trying to do. But I don't know, man. It just felt kind of slimy. And leaving aside the fact that Californians don't believe in lines/queues, leaving aside the fact that you walk in and just look like a friggin' dummy until somebody takes pity on you and asks what you need, leaving all that aside, it's just not great in an Apple store these days. And it stinks. And I feel so bad. I kept thinking to myself, the last place I lived before here is Charlottesville, Virginia, which has a bad reputation because of the gross people that came in and did terrible things in 2016, but is actually a very, very wonderful place to be. It's super progressive. I really miss it. And Charlottesville is about an hour west of where I am. And the nearest Apple store to Charlottesville is my store. So imagine I had driven to Richmond for an hour, gone to the Apple store, wanted to exchange my band, and they say, okay, screw right off. You have to go home and get your box for your Apple Watch. Like, how annoyed would I be? And there's places in Virginia, which is not a small state. And granted, a lot of Virginia is relatively rural, if not very rural, but there are places that have people. I promise they exist. Despite what John thinks, people exist below the Mason-Dixon. And so, like Roanoke, Virginia, Blacksburg, where I went to school, the nearest Apple stores to these places are either mine, which is like 3.5 hours away, or somewhere in North Carolina. Like, it's just, I can't fathom how upset I would be if I had made one of these drives and been turned away because he just needed to scan a barcode. It's so off-putting, and it just, I don't know, bums me out. This week's episode is brought to you by Tailscale. Tailscale is, to use their own line, a secure network that just works, which honestly is true. I've been a Tailscale user for the past several months, since before they said they were going to sponsor the show, and I can tell you it honestly is really, really good, and they can't pay us to say that. So what is Tailscale? Well, it's a secure network across other networks. So what does that mean? Well, let's say you have a server, maybe it's at school or some cloud instance somewhere. Maybe you have your own devices. Maybe you have a Raspberry Pi or 6. Maybe you have a Synology or something. One way or another, if all of these devices are on your same Tailscale network, you can communicate between them as though you're on the same network. That means if you're sitting on a park bench/picnic table in the middle of nowhere, as long as you're connected to your Tailscale network, you can reach all of these other devices and servers and whatnot as though you're on the same network. It is amazing and for all intents and purposes completely transparent. And what I really love about Tailscale is that it is completely free for personal use if you have 20 devices or less. So what you can do is go to tailscale.com, tailscale.com, check it out and sign up if you'd like. And they also wanted me to tell you that it makes a lot of other things really simple too. For example, if you want to do the whole SSH key exchange dance, Tailscale can manage that for you and make it extremely easy and extremely transparent. So a lot of people like me thought of Tailscale as just a VPN. It kind of sort of is a VPN, but really what it's about is linking all your devices irrespective of what network they're on. And that makes it super duper cool. So please visit tailscale.com, tailscale.com, and check it out. Like I said, it is free if you are using it for yourself and you have 20 devices or less. Thanks to Tailscale for sponsoring this week's episode.
This past weekend, we had a wedding in our family, and people who have been listening for a very long time might remember that a long time ago, my wife was a wedding photographer, and during this time, I would be her second shooter. So she was the main photographer, but I'd be like, standing off to the side with a long lens, like sniping pictures of people when they were smiling and not looking at me. And so we were at a family wedding, and we were not the photographers. They had other professional photographers there doing it. But I was like, well, I might as well, stick the 90mm lens on my Sony and try to get some good pictures. And I also use the iPhone, the 14 Pro, and so this is the first time I had actually used a big camera in a while. So this was my Sony A7R III, I think. I think it's the 3. Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think I ever got the 4. Anyway, A7R III with the 90mm Sony Prime macro lens, which is an awesome lens. Extremely sharp, handles pretty well. A little slow to focus, but otherwise, pretty good. It's the longest Sony Prime I had, and so I mounted that, and I was going to be, from audience distance to everything, so I couldn't, because there was, a real photographer there, my goal was to never be in the real photographer's way. Because I know from having shot weddings, that's really annoying when when someone who's not the photographer, who's just an attendee of the wedding, is walking in front of you, stealing your shot, or constantly being in your shot with their big camera sticking up. So I knew to stay out of their way and stay out of their shots and everything. So shot a bunch of pictures with the Sony, and I quickly wanted to pick through and edit them in some basic way and give them to them the next day. So I had kind of a quick turnaround. So happy that I had the laptop. I had my 16-inch with the SD card slot. Oh, what so nice! So popped the card out, did all that. I first tried. We talked a while, maybe a year or two ago. We talked about photo ingest apps. Apps that would be better than Apple Photos at picking through pictures from a camera card, or from a shoot, picking through and quickly deleting the ones that were blurry, or you have a multi-shot burst, delete the one or two that aren't as good and keep the other one. Being able to quickly review photos like that and pick and choose without first importing them all into Apple Photos and having them all cluttering up your library and everything else. I remember back when we did that, I was not super thrilled with the things I had tried, and then right afterwards, people all wrote in to say, try Photo Mechanic. Well, it took me a year or two, but here we are. This was the next time. So I tried Photo Mechanic. It was indeed very fast to load all the thumbnails. It was not at all for me. It's this is an app designed for very specific workflows that are way more specific and needy than what I needed, which was I just want to quickly look through these photos and pick the ones that are good, and then import them into something that can edit them in raw form to look nice. I haven't used Adobe Lightroom in a very long time. It was my preferred app to do that in the past. If I did this on a regular basis now, I'd probably go back to it, but I didn't even have it installed. I didn't want to bother installing it, so I'm all right, let me I'll pick through things with Photo Mechanic, which I eventually figured out how to do, and then I imported them all into Apple Photos on the Mac to edit the RAW. And I had very little time to do this, so I wanted to basically like hit the auto light button on all of them, do a couple of minor, like, mostly like pull the shadows up on the ones that needed it, a couple of slight white balance tweaks, but I'm not doing heavy editing, just some very quick basics so I can get these photos all to them and then tell them like, hey, if there's any of these that you really love, let me know, and I'll like really do a nice edit on them. This process reminded me of just how painful so much of this is. Figuring out how photo mechanic works, and then getting these photos into Apple Photos. And then Apple Photos, the editing interface, it has gotten a little bit less hostile over the last couple of years, but it would do things like occasionally lose the like base file for the photo. I edited like, about 150 photos is what I ended up with. And then I would go back to like drag them all out as JPEGs to send somewhere, and it would only have like 140. What happened to the other ones? Or I drag them out, and it would give me an error message saying, these 9 files or whatever, had errors. Too bad. What error? Who knows? Too bad. And then when I eventually figured out like they were missing their originals, what happened to them? I'm doing this all like on one Mac, like locally. Like, what happened to the files? Eventually, I finally fight it, and I do all my edits, and I get to the point where, okay, I'm ready to add these to the shared album, that we're all putting all these photos in. I try to do it, and I get a random error message with like an error code number. I eventually find that it is apparently an undocumented limitation that you can't add raw photos to shared albums within Apple Photos.
Oh, whoopsies.
Even though Apple Photos can operate on RAW, it even badges it with a little RAW icon so you know. There also seems to be no option to convert RAW to JPEG inside of Apple Photos. If I wanted to add these to the shared album, apparently I can't do that. Well, that sucks. Okay, then give me an option to convert them to JPEGs. Nope. So here's these photos that I put in here. They sync everywhere. They're viewable everywhere. They can be edited everywhere, but I can't add them to a shared album. Okay.
So did you retro batch them all or something like that and then re-ingest?
I exported them all out of the app by dragging into a folder, which created JPEGs for all of them. I deleted them all out of my photo library in RAW form. I still had the original RAW files, of course, but deleted them out of Apple Photos in RAW. Went to the trash can or whatever it's called in Apple Photos. Deleted them out of there, so they're really gone. Because otherwise, it would consider them duplicates. Because it considers duplicates even if they're in your trash. Thanks. And then finally re-imported them as JPEGs, and then finally it all was shareable and worked. So that's how to do that. In case anybody wants to, and this whole thing just reminded me, the weird limitations, the loss of files, which was scary, the nondescript error messages that didn't give any information. Apple Photos is just horrible for anything that was not shot on an iPhone. It is actively hostile towards any other camera's photos. It is especially hostile towards RAW handling, which is a shame because Apple has the software capability to do that. They had it with Aperture long ago. Photos has RAW editing built in. Frankly, if I'm really wanting to do a good job of it, I think Lightroom is a better RAW editor. But regardless, a separate day. This is just so hostile, and I'm glad I don't do this on a regular basis because it's very frustrating. And that being said, when I looked at the pictures of that day, when I compare the iPhone pictures versus the Sony pictures kick the iPhone pictures' asses so hard in so many ways. Not always, mind you. Like, where the iPhone still shines and will probably always be better than any other camera is areas where computational photography really can benefit. So that's things like HDR, where there is massive exposure range in the shot. And yes, you can expose to the highlights and then try to bring up the shadows and all that. You can do that with RAW editing, but you have to do that. It's a lot of work, and it's still tricky, and it's still hard to achieve certain dynamic range with like regular cameras, whereas the iPhone can do like super fast multi shot bursts that are merged instantly, you know, and perfectly into one shot. Like it can do things that standalone cameras really can't do still. So there were certain areas where the iPhone camera did win, especially as light got lower. And, you know, I cranked the ISO up as far as I knew that I could on the Sony, you know, did as much as I could with, you know, high ISO, wide open shooting, image stabilization. But in low light, the iPhone, with its computational, you know, chops, was still able to do a much better job. Obviously, video, the iPhone does a much better job. But the like well-lit photos I could get with that 90mm lens, oh my God, they looked so good and so much more detail and such more pleasing optics and even to some degree more natural colors compared to what the iPhone could give. It was a very good but frustrating experience. It was good in the sense like I'm really glad I brought this big camera to this important event for the family, and I'm really glad they have these nice pictures now. On the other hand, I kind of can't believe how crappy of an experience this still is all these years later. And like, I think it was actually a better experience before iCloud photo libraries, when we just had Lightroom versus Aperture versus iPhoto. I think things were better back then. Not in like a rose-colored glasses, like I'm forgetting how crappy other things were. No, I think in this particular area, they were just better.
They were definitely slower, that's for sure. I mean, I think
yes, that's true.
I'm gonna blame Photo Mechanic for your missing photo things, because I've literally never seen that, and I exercise photos a lot, and the exact workflow you're describing when I'm on my Long Island vacations, where I come back from the beach and then I process photos so we can see them on the, you know, process 1,500, 2,000 photos in time for us to be able to see a slideshow after dinner. So I'm familiar with that workflow, and Photos is not a great application. I complain about it all the time, but it's never lost the base files. So I think that was a Photo Mechanic thing. Photos sucks at RAW. I totally agree with that. That's why I have the external editing support, where I can use like that RAW Power program or, you know, Pixelmator or all sorts of other external editors. I don't bother trying to do anything with RAWs in Photos. I have them in Photos, but when I want to do anything with them, I take them out to another program that gives me way more control over that. You know, and that's where we really feel like the loss of aperture. You mentioned they have this tech or whatever. It's Photos is still like, they don't expose that type of stuff. I'm sure it's doing stuff with the RAWs that's smart under the covers and it understands that they're RAW, but it's not a very detailed photo editor. But for the actual edits that it's doing to the photos, I think the very limited set of editing controls they have there, bugs aside and slowness aside, do a pretty good job of being okay. And the only suggestion that would have made things go smoother for you would have been to just avoid Photo Mechanic, which obviously you were trying out or whatever, but like import directly into Photos. And then anytime you need to do stuff to work around the dumb limitations in the shared photo library thing or whatever, rather than dragging things out to get JPEGs, select them all and do export. Because when you do export, I have more faith in that process, like that it's not trying to do some big, you know, drag destination API, blah, 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 but it's just like a batch process. And B, then you get to pick the details of what you're exporting. So you can pick the JPEG compression level, you can pick the size, you can pick what metadata you want to include. It's just one dialog. It's not a big deal, but I feel like, I mean, maybe in your case it doesn't matter because you just want JPEGs and who cares, you just take the defaults, but it gives you way more control, and then you could, you know, pull those JPEGs back in. I think I was aware of the RAW sharing thing, but shared photo libraries down-res everything you dump into them anyway, so it just always feels like kind of like you're sharing thumbnails with people. But yeah, that's another example of how Photos, it's willing to acknowledge the existence of RAWs, but it does not prefer them. And that's why, by the way, with my photo workflow is I kind of do, like, you know, you said, hey, if you see any of these pictures that you like, let me know and I'll give you a good edit. The way I deal with my photos is I do all of everything with them with JPEGs. And then after I've done all of my things and I favorited them or whatever, anything that I favorited, I go pull the RAWs for those and dump them into the library. So I have the JPEG plus the RAW, and the RAW is not edited, but the JPEG is. So I have like basically like this, and this is only with the advent of your fancy camera that you sent me, where I shoot in JPEG plus RAW on two separate cards at the same time. I pull the RAWs in as the this photo is a favorite. It was good enough for me to invest all this time in editing. And also I have the RAW, which I would need to re-edit to match the JPEG if I wanted to, but it's my backstop against like, I have the best quality version of this as I can. And in practice, most of the time, if you have your JPEG settings cranked on the camera, the JPEG is fine. But every once in a while, I'll have a favorite and be like, oh, this would be better if only I could pull those shadows up a little bit. And then I chuck the JPEG and go right to the RAW. I'm like, but I can. And, but most of the time the JPEGs are good enough. But yeah, I really wish Photos was better in a lot of ways, but better about understanding RAWs is definitely a big one.
You said, Marco, that you were really pleased with the output of the big camera. Did you enjoy shooting on the big camera? Because when I do get out my big camera, which is considerably less fancy than what you're talking about, I find that not only do I actually kind of enjoy shooting on it and kind of not in several different ways, but certainly, especially like you were saying, in a well-lit day, because I find that for my camera, and I think it would be much, much better with the Sony, but for my camera, which is an Olympus Micro Four Thirds, it falls on its face when the light gets low, and the iPhone is just so much better when in low light. But in daytime, man, even my Micro Four Thirds really can capture a phenomenal picture. And in a lot of ways, I enjoy having something big and heavy that I have dials and knobs and things to focus on what I'm doing. Do you enjoy that at all? Do you enjoy the tea ceremony, dare I say, of having a big camera? Or
it's
was
not a
this
tea ceremony? It's actually, those knobs actually do something.
Anyway, I'm just trying to make a joke, John. Jesus. But anyway, the point is, did you enjoy using the big camera? Do you think this would cause you to bring it out more often, or was this kind of like a burden that you felt was worth it in order to get the output on the other end?
I enjoyed parts of it. I mean, in certain ways, I did feel like I was fighting with it, and part of that was just like, certain choices or certain advancements that, this is now a somewhat old camera body that is missing on some of the newer stuff. Autofocus was definitely one area where this was not a great combo. And I don't know if that's because the lens has it's a macro lens, so it has a very different kind of focusing system than like a high performance sports lens would have. So it was a little slow. It often just the camera often just chose wrong, like what to focus on. So that was not great. It was not great at tracking motion. Like if I was taking a subject, taking a picture of a subject, like walking down the aisle, well, they're moving diagonally towards me or away from me, and so it has to track the focus between shutter shots or whatever as they're moving. Since I half push the button to focus it. So in areas like that, like the actual the focus performance was hard, and there's a lot of shots where I had the light, I had the speed, and I just missed the focus because of subject motion.
Did you do a firmware update before you went?
Of course not. Why would I do that?
Because
that's
the
too much like homework.
Has changed significantly since you got that camera. Although it sounds like your limitation might have been the lens. That's kind of why, when I got my fancy lens, I was excited to get it because it's the latest and greatest, and their focusing motors get better and better. And it sounds like yours is just not even when it was new, it was not really built for this purpose. But
yeah, it's not.
That said, the software for object tracking and continuous autofocus or whatever has only improved over the years. And yeah, you should have probably done a firmware update. Remember I talked about how I thought this camera didn't have pet eye detection, but then I did the firmware update and it did. Yeah, software marches on. You should. It's too late now, but check how far behind your firmware is on that camera.
I'm probably better off not knowing. But
before the next wedding, update the firmware.
But I loved the experience of using it, at certain times where the lighting situation in certain times was fairly challenging because there was a lot of in the reception there was a lot of backlighting because there was a big open door. There was situations like that where I knew I wanted to manually adjust the exposure, and I knew that by my thumb is a hardware knob, and I can just turn it and get a +1 or a -1 exposure really easily by turning this knob 3 clicks, and I know I'm going to get that, and it's displayed in the viewfinder, and I don't have to put it down or check or go into a menu or anything like that. So having that kind of the muscle memory and physical controls is extremely pleasing when you're doing something like this, and you can just do stuff faster. I knew that I wouldn't have to worry about things like storage or battery life because I knew the capacities of the camera were massive, and I knew I'd be fine all day. I didn't have to monitor everything and baby it. So all that was great. I loved having quick review where I could just if I took a shot and I wasn't sure, like, am I going fast enough to get this sharp? I could just hit the little play button and zoom right in, and in 2 button presses, I could tell instantly, did I get this? Is this sharp or not? Ultimately, though, I did miss a lot of the computational advantages. Like, again, like the exposure, HDR, that's what I really, really missed overall. But I did enjoy the process to some degree. I don't. First of all, I'm not artistic enough or a good enough photographer to want to do photography as a general hobby, and that's why, like, for almost all of my day-to-day use, the iPhone is way more than I actually need, and I appreciate it, and I use only it almost all the time. But when there's like a really important family event like this, I did really enjoy having this, much more specialized tool for the job. Even though, as John said, my lens was definitely not meant for this job. But I really did enjoy having this there and playing this role, in part because it meant I didn't have to dance, because I had something else to do.
Amen, brother.
and in part because I knew that, I knew that somebody in the family would appreciate what I was doing. That, like, the people, like, I was trying to make this event better for people and make people happy, and I knew this would do a really good job of it. And when I compare the iPhone pictures of the same event, they're fine, but they're not great. These, they aren't all great, they aren't even mostly great, but some of them are really great. And the iPhone couldn't have gotten the pictures from here that were really great.
And by the way, both of you were saying, like, oh, the iPhone does better in low light due to computational stuff. Yeah, as long as you never look at those pixels, because it's a mess down there. Let me tell you, that computational stuff does not come for free, and it just makes a hash out of people's faces if you zoom in even a little bit. Not that you're pixel peeping even, but just like, if you really, like, when we say, like, oh, the iPhone did a good job in low light, it's doing its darndest to try to make it so the people's faces are visible, and then you can see them or whatever, but they are basically oil paintings. Like, they're not, it's not... you get farther and farther away from the photons that might hit your eye, and it now becomes more like this abstract representation of what might have been there on the day, which is what you want. Like, when you're looking at on your phone at phone sizes, that's exactly what you want. Hey, here's all our friends, and we're at this concert, and you can see everyone's faces and recognize them, and you can see the concert in the background, and it's all lit well enough. But if you were to actually look at that photo on a big computer screen and see what the pixels that actually make up your friend's face, they're a monster.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where, like, it starts to fall apart once you actually need a lot of resolution and detail, and phone cameras just cannot provide that. They can simulate it in a way that looks really good on phone screens, which is how most of us care about stuff these days. But when you have a situation like this where you want something more than that, the big cameras still win, and I'm very pleased with my big camera, like, once every 3 years when I actually need it.
Yeah. No, I like I said, I enjoy getting my camera out from time to time, but I find myself with each passing day reaching for it less and less often, because it's just for what my needs. I find that it's just often not the best choice, especially, like I said, if the light is anything but perfect.
I will say, too, David Schaub _Mac in the chat brings up the obvious question here, that, whether the Pro Raw 48 megapixel images on the iPhone 14 Pro might be, more competitive. And to be honest, I haven't tried them yet, but reviewers have said that the shot-to-shot time with Pro Raw 48 megapixels is like multiple seconds, and that's just too slow for this kind of context. Like, you can't, it seems like if you're setting up like an artistic shot, maybe a landscape or some kind of, like, still scene at night, like, sure, that sounds like a great idea. But for like event photography, where you're trying to shoot a moving event where timing matters and you can't have somebody just do something again, it's just too slow. And the Sony can fire off multiple shots a second. And
yeah, I think it does. I think, what is it, like 41 megapixels your camera, and you could do like at least 10 frames a second in RAW, I think,
something like that,
as opposed to 3 seconds per frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reviews I saw of the 48 megapixel RAW, and I have taken a bunch of them myself, it did a good comparison, because they compared it with the 13 Pro, and they, like, what I remember seeing was like a picture of sailboats, like in a harbor or whatever, and they showed the 48 megapixel next to the iPhone 13 Pro 12 megapixel. and you could see so much more detail on the sailboats. Like you really saw the sort of mosaic-y, oil painty pattern of the actual 12 megapixel sensor on the 13 Pro. And the 14 Pro, yeah, it was noisy, but like you could actually make out the various railings and lines and stuff that you could not see at all in the 13 Pro. So those 48 megapixels are doing work for you to give you more detail, to make the pictures more resilient to, let's say, a crop or, zooming in a little bit to see the details, right? And I've just taken some very sunny landscape photos with it, and the photos probably aren't good enough for me to waste 80 megabytes on them, but they do look pretty good.
We are sponsored this week by Memberful. Monetize your passion with membership. Memberful has everything you need as a content creator to run a membership program. And it fully integrates into all the tools you're already using, and they have all the different features that you might think your membership program should have. Things like Apple Pay support. Of course, listeners to our show probably want Apple Pay support, gift subscriptions, free trial support, hosting of things like private podcasts and other premium content, and so much more. And what I love about Memberful is that not only does it take all these like kind of hairy, difficult, tedious problems off of your plate, but they care about keeping you independent. You retain control and ownership of all the branding everywhere, your audience, and your membership. Payments even go directly to your own Stripe account. So they don't want to like lock people into just them. And frankly, I wouldn't consider anybody else to run our membership program. I would only go either, self-hosted, which is probably something I should stop doing, or I go to Memberful because they just make everything so easy and they really align their incentives with yours. They have a world-class support team ready to help you simplify your memberships and improve your conversions and grow your revenue. They are passionate about your success. You always have access to a real human at Memberful. See for yourself why so many content creators have chosen to use Memberful for their membership programs. And this gives them sustainable, recurring, diverse revenue. So get started for free with no credit card required at memberful.com/ATP. Once again, memberful.com/ATP. Get started today for free with no credit card required. Memberful.com/ATP. Thank you so much to Memberful for sponsoring our show.
Okay, let's do some Ask ATP. We haven't had the chance to do some in quite a while, so let's start clearing the decks. Steve Hallroyd asks, with the new always-on lock screen on the iPhone 14 Pro, do you think there's any increased risk of burn-in developing on the screens? Or is burn-in no longer a potential problem for modern iPhone screens? That's a great question, and I think of the three of us, John, you're probably best equipped to answer.
So the always-on lock screen does try to be dimmer than the regular screen, and Apple touted their color adjustance. So if you have like a person's face on the lock screen, it will try to make the colors look lifelike, even though it's dimming whatever it's doing there. But the key part is that they're dimming, and burn-in happens much more at higher brightness levels. So the fact that they're dimming it down is helping to protect against burn-in. Is there an increased risk of burn-in versus a screen that's off? Yes. Having the screen on increases your risk of burn-in versus having a screen that's off, especially a screen where the background isn't changing. And your lock screen, I think maybe some of them do rotate over time, but like there's not a lot moving or changing on your always-on lock screen. And the time does change digits, but like if you have, and because the user can pick whatever picture they want, if they pick a picture that has a big bright circle on a black background or something, I think there is an increased risk of burn-in. That said, we've had OLED screens on phones for a while now, and if there was, because it's the iPhone and because it's Apple, if there was any epidemic of burn-in from people just like having their status bar burn-in or playing a game constantly or having Facebook burn-in, I think we would have heard about it by now. So I think Apple's selection of the panels for their screen and their management of the brightness levels, particularly managing them, this is what televisions do as well, managing the OLED panel within the limits that will keep burning away. Like, because lots of these panels can go way brighter than they're driven, but if you drive them to their absolute maximum brightness, you're going to get burn-in, right? And so manufacturers have to choose how far do we want to push this part. And I think Apple is very conservative in this regard, even with the always-on screen. So we'll see. The always-on screens are brand new. The risk is increased, but my read on the way Apple deals with OLED screens is that they are always very conscious not to push the limits of what the panel is capable of and to avoid burning at all costs. Because as you can imagine, that would be a big story and it would be a disaster when you sell several 100 million, billion. I don't know how many Apple sells, but it's a lot. So they're going to be real careful with it.
Thomas Ferraro writes, I am at best a hobbyist developer. My only public-facing application is the Roku TV app for the radio station that I volunteer for, the great WFMU. I am trying to do the right thing and use version control. I sometimes get lost in trying out different ways to do something and think, darn, the way I did it 2 days ago was better. But it seems crazy. I should branch for every line of code I write and commit every time I get something that compiles and runs. So what's your best practice? Oh, man, how many hours do we have available? Because this could go all day. I think, put very simply and kind of oversimplifying a bit, what I tend to do is whenever I'm doing almost anything, I like to create a branch. Typically, I try to associate that branch with an issue in GitHub. That's how I do issue tracking. And then I'll do my work in that branch. I'll check in whenever I feel like I'm at a decent stopping point or I've made a particular, pardon the pun, but development, or I'm at a point that I may want to fall back to later. I'll check into that branch. And then I'm probably a little bit bananas, but I actually quite like issuing a pull request from me to get that branch merged back into main. And I will go through that pull request similar to how I would do it at my last jobby job and look at the diffs and look at what's going on. And I find that for me, that context switch of looking at the code within, get the GitHub pull request, whatever, that actually really does help me find issues and bugs and problems and so on and so forth. And so I really like that flow. I think there is a name for this, and it's one of the the flows that GitHub recommends. But basically, like I said, branch when you're doing things and issue a pull request to get things back into the main branch. And I really like that, and that really works well for me. Obviously, everyone's different. Marco, what do you like to do?
My main branch, I try to keep always shippable. Whenever I'm doing something that is like a quick bug fix, I'll just work on the main branch and I'll commit it when it's done. So I might be, putting a commit in, after a day of work, maybe, or maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depends. But, generally speaking, like what is in the main branch is shippable. At any moment, I can take what's in the main branch and send it to the App Store. Anything that I'm working on that may not be shippable yet. So for whatever reason. So for instance, every June when we get the new betas, I make I had an iOS 16 branch. And so I branched in June, and I that branch is built with the new SDK. It's built with the assumption that I'm requiring some new version of iOS, maybe 15, maybe 16. And then I can start like fixing deprecations and adopting some of the new APIs and stuff like that, using some of the new Xcode features for the project file in that branch, and everything. But then that branch is not going to get merged in until the GM or RC SDK is released right before the OS is released, and then I merge it in and then I release it. Branches for me are either things that aren't going to be ready for some time, like a future OS update, or experiments that I'm not sure I'm going to keep. So for instance, if I'm doing like a redesign of a screen, I'll make a branch for that. Or if I'm doing like, a revamping of the sync protocol, that's clearly a branch because that's something that, I'm not going to get into a shippable, definitely doing this kind of state for a little while. And I'm going to want some commits in the meantime to just save my work or to be able to send it to other people or in test flight or something like that. That is how I use branches. I don't branch very aggressively, nor do I commit very aggressively. I commit when something is done, whether it's a step along a road, like, an OS thing, like a branch would be for, or whether it's a really simple thing, like, hey, I just fixed a stupid little bug that was 2 lines of code. That's a commit. But I don't use them as aggressively as most people do, from what I hear.
So having worked at like big companies with hundreds, maybe thousands of developers and literal millions of lines of code, often in like giant mono repos, I've been subjected to, let's say, lots and lots of different ways of dealing with version control in terms of branching models, how it integrates with issue tracking, how it integrates with projects and features, and just so many different ways, many of them motivated by whatever the exciting ideas or, fads or trends in the industry are. Sometimes it's just someone has an idea. Sometimes it's just this was the founder of the company. It's the way they wanted to do it. And when I heard Casey describing his thing, I always felt like you have like Stockholm syndrome for like you'd worked in a corporate environment for so long that you were reproducing that in a project that you're just working on by yourself. But there are some benefits to it. But from my personal perspective is having gone through all of those different systems and branching models and different pieces of version control software and everything, one of the luxuries of working on a hobby level project by yourself is you do not have to subject yourself to all of the bookkeeping that was involved with all the various, branching and feature models and issue tracking that you had to do in a corporate environment or that you'd have to do in a project where you work with other people. So it's a pleasant thing to realize that you're the only person working on it. And the only thing you have to worry about is what makes you feel comfortable. And to that end, most of my use of version control in my little, my dinky apps where I am the sole developer is motivated by, surprise, my desire not to lose data, which you might not think would be a thing, but especially with programming, when you're banging your head against some problem and you're working on it for a long time, I get that feeling, which is like, if my computer went up in flames now, I would not want to have to redo or refigure out what I just figured out, right? Would I remember all the details? Because this has happened to me a few times in the past, is why I have this motivation. Like
your computer catches fire?
No, but just like you lose some work because usually just through to like a carelessness back in the early days of, didn't hit save and didn't go to the floppy disk or something, like all sorts of, foibles where you're like, oh, I have to redo a programming task. And you'd be surprised or maybe not, to see yourself go all through all the same things. You'd go into the same 3 dead ends you went the first time you did it. And it's like, couldn't I have just skipped to the end there where I re-implemented the solution that I eventually figured out? No, apparently not. Apparently your brain has to make the same stupid mistakes again. So I always want to avoid that. So my strategy around version control has a lot to do with the thought that, like, where are these bits? Are these bits only on this SSD on my Mac? In that situation, if you're using git commit is not doing anything for you. Oh, I made a bunch of commits, so I know the data's safe. No, it's on your Mac's SSD, and if that thing goes up in flames, oh, there goes all your git commits. You got to push, right? And now once you're pushing, like, oh, but if I got to push, that gets the bits off your machine. If your origin is, GitHub or whatever, gets the bits off your machine and onto another machine that is far away and hopefully not going to go up in flames at the same time. But once you do that, you're like, do I want to push things to the origin repo when I'm in the middle of stuff and I made a big mess of things, right? And that gets you into the situation where you're like, but then if I had made a branch for it, if it's a mess, it's fine. Like all those disciplines that are so much more important when you're in a multi-billion-dollar company with this really important giant code base with hundreds of developers, always keeping branches shippable, doing patches on maintenance branches, feature branches, all that stuff kind of becomes important as you an individual developer to give you the freedom. You should never feel afraid to push to get the bits off your machine as an individual hobbyist developer. So if to give yourself that freedom, you need to do all your work in branches, do all your work in branches. They're lightweight. It's not a big deal. Your repos aren't going to be bazillions of lines of code. Just make a branch for everything that you want to do. And that way, you can make a big mess in that branch. Have a totally non-compiling app. Have it be a giant mess. That's the whole point of that branch, is that you should never feel like, I'm stashing things or I'm just doing local commits. No, push. Check that check mark in Xcode that says, do you want to also push to the remote repo? Yes, you always want to push to the remote repo. Why? So if your Mac goes up in flames or crashes or you don't lose any data, right? And so that's my strategy is, I never want to be afraid to push. I do my major work in branches. I don't have the discipline that I used to have in terms of branch management. To give an example, I'm working on I made a branch for a feature that I wanted to add to Switch Glass, right? And I named the branch after the feature that I wanted to add, and that branch became my 2.0 branch. Like that's not a thing. That's not a thing that would ever happen in the disciplined world of, corporate software, because that's just not, you don't accidentally find it. But if you're a single person working on an app, whatever. Like I'd already, to implement the feature, I'd already destroyed the app and made it totally broken and non-functional and everything about it, right? So at that point, and once I got the feature working, I'm like, this is just going to be the 2.0 branch. That is a luxury you have as a lone hobbyist developer. No one's going to tell you, you shouldn't do that. You should make a separate branch for that. And nope, tough luck. I'm just doing it in the one branch that I have here. And as I get closer, I will, push this up to the main line. I will probably pull off a 1.x branch Unfortunately, the Mac App Store policies don't allow me to do sane things like continuing to maintain and patch 1.x. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if the Mac App Store understood the type of model? Especially since one of the reasons I'm not releasing 2.0 is because I have to bump the minimum system version. So I would love to keep 1.0 alive and well and patched for people with older OSs, but the Mac App Store does not have anything to do with it. Anyway, enough ranting about Apple's stupid policies. My advice is take advantage of the things that you can do as a hobbyist developer that you couldn't working in large teams, but also try to make sure your bits are always at least in more than one place.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. Like, yes, I can totally understand how my like process and procedures that I've set for myself could feel overblown to sounds like both of you. And maybe it is, but I've found that what I like to do is the bare minimum that makes me feel confident that I can always undo an oops. And I'm not saying that I'm right for you or anyone else, but for me, I found that if I have, several different features that I'm juggling at once, I have definitely done the thing where, oops, this branch is now the branch, like you were describing, John. But generally speaking, I like to be able to go back and forth in different branches to different features to work on different things and so on. And I like having GitHub issues to kind of keep track of what I need to do and in the rough order in which I need to do it. So all of these are to give me just an array of parachutes that I can rely upon so that no matter how bad I am at my job, which sometimes is very bad, or how dumb I am, which sometimes is very dumb, I always have some parachute I can latch onto and save myself from myself. And that's all this is for me. And you were kind of saying that, John, that, whatever your particular threshold is, that's what you should do. And then that's where I ended up. And I found that when I cheat and when I don't kind of follow my own rules, I almost always end up regretting it. And I think that whatever your rules may be, you should stick with them and do what you think is best. And really quick, real-time follow-up, I only glanced at it because I'm trying to record a podcast right now, but I believe that GitHub Flow is what GitHub calls the kind of process I use. And I'll put a link in the show notes, assuming it's not garbage when I read it later, that kind of describes the basic gist of what I'm doing.
And part of when you do like pull requests to your software, part of that is just sort of making an excuse/mechanism to use reviewing tools that you prefer. Because, technically you could review in the little Xcode window when you push, right? But maybe that interface sucks. Maybe you can't annotate, blah, blah, blah. And then like, I would prefer, it's so much easier to review and annotate in GitHub with a pull request. So make yourself a pull request. Like, it's just, you don't, if the only reason you're doing this to use the tool, that's a perfectly good reason. Because if that's, how you prefer to use it. And in terms of being able to get back to a point in time, I wish I knew Git as well as I know other version control systems, but I do have confidence that if there is something I want to do with Git, as long as I actually did commits and pushes and so on and so forth, I can get to any point in time. I mean, I'll have to Google first because I never remember how to do anything in Git, but I know the data is safe. I know because I committed, and I know because I always push that all this stuff is in a repo, in a branch, in desperation. I can get back to any point in time. And I guess that's the other advice is you have to actually use version control. Even if you don't have my paranoia about, losing data, if you just like work all day on a file and just rewrite it in Xcode and then do a commit at the end of the day, the 15th rewrite in the middle of the day is actually gone, right? Like you don't have that anymore. So do actually commit at any point where you think I may ever want to get back to this data. Whether or not you push, you can based on your paranoia or whatever, but you have to commit. That's one of the reasons why when I use BBEdit, I have a feature enabled in BBEdit that I've used since its introduction, which is literally every time I hit save in BBEdit, it saves a copy of the file as it existed. I think as it existed before I hit save. I forget which one it is. I always get confused. But anyway, it saves a copy of a file into another folder on my hard drive. It's called the BBEdit backups folder, and it's organized by date. And that folder has a lot of files in it.
Oh, wow.
That's one, literally every time I hit save. That's one of the ways when I did like my ebooks for my macOS 10 reviews, I could tell you like how many times I hit save on a document or how many times I did a thing, because I would just count the BBEdit backup files for a thing. And that has saved my butt so many times. That is not version control. That's what people did before version control. I'm not recommending this as a form of version control. I'm just saying, like, you're not going to use version control for a random text file you're going to make, but having the ability, always knowing that you can go back to something, you have to actually hit that save. And in Git, hitting that save is stash or commit. So do that.
Yeah. All right, finally, Nick Clinch writes, as a developer, do you use the production version or the latest beta version of your own apps for daily use? If you use the production versions, do you subscribe to your own in-app purchases to get all the features? Yes, of course. If one uses your own app, you subscribe to your own stuff. But generally speaking, I'll use betas on my phone just because I want to test the latest and greatest. What are you doing? Well, John, it's not your phone, but what are you doing on your Mac?
I try to run whatever my dev version is, like that I'm working on. And it helps with my programs that they literally run all the time, like they're always resident. I run them 24 hours a day, and I'm always running whatever is the latest thing. So luckily, with the advent of TestFlight for the Mac, I'm running the TestFlight versions of all my apps, but sometimes that's not the latest. When I'm actually doing active development, I'm working on the app for days or weeks without submitting a TestFlight build because I'm making a mess of it, and I force myself to run. Like I'm dogfooding whatever crap I'm doing, which means that I have to make it so it doesn't crash or, whatever. But I want to be running that all the time, just because if there's some weird problem that only happens after running it for 72 hours straight, I need to find it.
Fair enough. What are you doing, Marco, with Overcast?
Pretty much the same thing. I don't run beta builds. I run dev builds, which means whatever the last version was that I hit build and run from Xcode onto my phone, that's what I'm running. Oftentimes, it's hilariously broken, and I consider that a motivator to fix it. It's a critical part of my, QA, such as it is, process. Anything that I change, I know is going to affect me directly for days or weeks or months afterwards. I want to make sure that whatever I'm working on, I am using to give me the highest chance of catching any bugs or problems or shortcomings before I ship it even to beta users, let alone to all of my customers. I am my first beta tester, and I'm always running the absolute latest version I can run, which is the last thing I wrote. It's on my phone. Thanks to our sponsors this week, Green Chef, Memberful, and Tailscale. And thank you to our members who support us directly. You can join at atp.fm/join and hear the current last version of the ATP Movie Club, and who knows what else we'll think of in the future. Not to mention you get the bootleg feed, ad-free episodes, all sorts of fun stuff. So thank you very much to all of you, and we will talk to you next week.
Now that the show is over, it's time to give to St. Jude's. They're funding research. Curing diseases. Every year you get a new iPhone. Now think about the good you'll do when you're funding research. Childhood diseases. Our friends at Relay organize this annually. It's time to do your part and give directly to STJUDECHILD and SRESERCHOSPITAL. Be generous, they fund the research. They're curing diseases. Fund the research. The link is in the show notes now.
So I mentioned, I don't even know if this made it on the released version of the show, but I mentioned several weeks ago, I think it was right before we did our Apple event show, so like the Monday before, I decided that was the most appropriate time to flip the switch and move from Heroku to Linode. So for some context, my website ran on Heroku since my website existed. So that was like 2013, 2014. And I chose Heroku because I wanted something that nerds that I knew seemed to like. And Heroku, at the time at least, was very much that. And I wanted something that seemed like it was fairly straightforward for me to use, which here again, Heroku definitely checked that box. And I wasn't really interested in doing any of what I would call the lower level maintenance of owning a server. So I don't have to worry about software updates. I don't want to have to worry about, any of the kind of administrivia. I don't have to worry about hardening the server or anything like that. I just want to have what basically amounted to 2 node apps that I could throw over the wall and would run. And Heroku did that for me for, almost, 8 years, something like that. But then, much like my AT&T to Verizon story, Heroku just justifiably decided that they were no longer going to allow any sort of free, they call their processes dynos, D-Y-N-O. So they weren't going to allow free dynos, which was fine for my website because I was paying $7 a month for that. Because I needed, well, at the time, and maybe this isn't true anymore, but at the time I started paying for it, it was because I really wanted to support SSL. And in order to do that, you needed to have a level of dyno that was not free. I think what mine was called was hobby, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not particularly powerful, not particularly robust, but it's enough that they'll let you, do a Let's Encrypt certificate or perhaps a certificate of your own that you bring to them. So I was paying $7 a month for my website, and then the Showbot that runs that gathers titles from IRC as we're recording, that was on a separate dyno that was running on their free plan, and they said a month or two ago, hey, FYI, in the next several months we're going to start charging for free dynos. It's not going to be free anymore, and it occurred to me, okay, I'm already paying more than the either $5 or $6 a month that Linode charges for their most basic VPS. And so why don't I just see if I can move all of this to Linode? Because it seems like that should be something that I'm capable of. And I don't plan to go through the in and out of everything that's involved in that, but I thought I'd call just a couple of things out as things that I thought were interesting or unique. First of all, I haven't really done anything with a raw Linux server in like a decade plus. So this whole process, I don't know if you gentlemen remember this, but this whole process started with me asking the two of you, what are people using for Linux servers now? Like, are we still on Ubuntu? Is that still a thing? Because last time I was paying attention, that's what I was using.
And by the way, and this is totally fair. Like when you are setting up a new server that you haven't done in a long time, that's the first question everyone asks. What distro do I get? Like that. Of course, that's a reasonable thing to not know if you haven't been in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually should say that even though the two of you are dear, some of my best friends in the world, nevertheless, I felt like such a dunce coming to you like hat in hand, Puss in Boots style, like, guys, what do I do? Like, it's been so long, I need help. And we're going to talk a little more about that in a minute. But you were both very gracious, and I very much appreciate that you didn't make fun of me, like I probably would have done to you too if the roles were reversed. So I appreciate you not poking fun at a time of need. But I had several different like balls in the air, plates spinning all at the same time. One of the things I realized is that my website, is this custom software that I wrote for myself, as the three of us and many others are wont to do. Honestly, I don't have any particular love for this engine that I wrote in 2014, and if I wasn't so lazy, I would probably start using something different, either like a package. I would probably start by really at least looking at John Sundell's engine. I forget what it's called now off the top of my head. But right now it's a Node app. And at the time in which I started to want to go down this road, I was still using Node version 4. And of the three of us, John would probably know even better than I that Node version 4 is quite old now, like very, very old. I don't know exactly when, but it is quite old. John, you don't have any idea when that was from, do you?
That's old even to my ears. I don't even know if we used that version of Node ever at work. I think by the time my old job, when we started using Node, we were past that. What are they on now? Like 20-something, 30-something?
No, I thought it was 12, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't even recall.
No, they're farther along than that. LTS is 16, current is 18.
Okay, so there you go. So anyway, so I knew I needed to upgrade from Node 4.x to whatever is current. It sounds like 16 or 18. Another thing that I needed to worry about is certificates, because I was using Let's Encrypt at Heroku, but I needed to do something else, because unless I'm missing something, and perhaps if I was using like a load balancer or something fancy like that, maybe it would be a little more magic. But I was going to have to like figure out how to use certificates. And the way that Heroku worked is you basically had them figure things out with Let's Encrypt. And I forget the terminology. Marco, jump in when you're ready. But they would terminate the SSL connection at their stuff, and then just roll unencrypted internally in their own network and ask my server or my process for things. And so now I need to handle this myself. Like I need my Node instance to deal with certificates. And then finally, I have a server that is on the internet. And granted, I will try to do the obvious things to lock it down, but there's a lot of non-obvious things I probably need to do to harden this. And Marco really saved my bacon on that in particular. But
well, no, Linux saved your bacon on that one, because the reality is, like, all modern Linuxes are pretty good with pretty minimal setup in terms of like internet ready security. Like you have to basically like, yeah, you know what, make SSH not take passwords, and that's about all you have to do. Like everything is pretty secure by default these days.
And that's fair, but you gave me a lot of good tips, and I don't remember the specifics, but I took copious notes for future Casey, because current Casey has already forgotten, but you gave me a lot of great notes of things that you do for your servers, which were genuinely extremely, extremely helpful, and I really appreciate it. The upgrade from Node 4.x to whatever I'm on now was actually surprisingly straightforward. I had to change very, very little code, which was stunning to me. I assumed I was going to have to rewrite half this damn engine, and I had to change almost nothing, which was great. Getting the certificates squared away. What is it? Certbot is the command line tool that it seems
or acme.sh is like the certbot client. Or yeah.
You were saying the same
when
thing.
you did the big Node upgrade, though, did you happen to run npm audit?
I did. Yes, I did. And it was a
what
mess.
What did that say?
Oh, it said that everything was broken and it was a miracle that my server was not on fire.
It's just a giant security hole.
Basically, yeah. But here again, like upgrading everything, which took several incantations and it took me several tries, but upgrading everything, for the most part, I had to change so very little code. I'm still stunned by that. And I am, last I looked anyway, I'm auditing cleanly. I'm on node either 16 or 18. I forget which one off the top of my head. And I hardened the server. I turned off, passworded log.
You're auditing cleanly. You didn't have to do any major version breaking change updates to packages?
Well, no, I absolutely did, but it didn't break my code. Like, I'm stunned by it. I'm telling you. I know. I'm very impressed. Either that or I'm totally wrong. Either is possible. But I'm pretty sure I'm on latest and greatest of basically everything, and it was fine. But anyway, yeah, so now I'm doing certificates with a combination of certbot or acme.sh or whatever it is, and piping and pumping those certificates into Node, and Node is looking for these certificates on the file system so it can use them appropriately. And all in all, it seems good. Let me be clear, wonderful listeners who we love so much and value incredibly. This is not an invitation to hack me. I am not looking for that.
Yeah,
I am not asking you to do like we did when the Showbot was new and try to break it in every way imaginable. No, thank you. No, you do not get a sticker for breaking me. No, you do not. You might get a thank you if you break me in a very gentle way and explain how to fix it. Maybe you'll get a thank you. But even still, please, just no, not a challenge. Challenge not accepted. Challenge not offered. Challenge not accepted. But I had to do all these things. And granted, Linode is a past and I'm sure future sponsor. I got to tell you, it is really nice. And for another project, I inherited something that was on DigitalOcean, and it is not as nice, if you ask me, on DigitalOcean. Like, I really like the way Linode works. They think the way my brain thinks. Their tools are very robust and reasonably straightforward. This isn't an ad for Linode, but hand to God, like, I really did enjoy it quite a bit. I wanted to talk very briefly about a sponsor of this episode. This is purely coincidental because this has been in the show notes for literally a month. But I am using Tailscale on this server, which is super cool. And as I briefly talked about in the sponsor read, which you may or may not have heard, Tailscale is basically like, let's put all of your devices on the same virtual network. And so any of these devices can talk to any of the other devices, despite the fact that my server's at Linode and my home computer is at home on Verizon Fios. Like, we can talk to each other, and it's transparent. It's as though we're on the same network, which is super duper cool. And I really, really like. Is it necessary? Well, no, maybe not in this particular context, but in other contexts, I think it would be kind of necessary. And either way, it's still just very, very convenient. And I really, really dig it. But one of the perks of doing all this is that, in the chat room may or may not have noticed this recently, but now the Showbot can roll on SSL. It can be HTTPS. For those who don't listen to the chat, we have this robot that lives in IRC, and you can go to, it used to be http://www.caseless.com/showbot, and you would see the titles that people have suggested in semi-real time. And I could never put that behind SSL or behind it was never secure because I was running on a free dyno at Heroku. And maybe I could have done something to make this work, but I never really cared enough. But now I'm on my own server, baby, and virtual or not, I can do this all myself. And so that's what I'm doing. So for the last few weeks, Even the showbot is now https:// et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really cool, and I dig that. But finally, the thing that I think blew my mind the most about this was I remembered hearing some vague smattering about how Visual Studio Code, which is my preferred editor for doing web-related things, can do some sort of like you attach to something and then magic happens and you're like editing stuff on the server even though you're running it locally or something like that.
Have you never used this feature of Visual Studio Code? I thought this is why you loved it so much.
No. So what I would do in the past is I would run an instance of Node locally, like not even in Docker or anything like that. It would just straight up be a local instance of Node running my website locally. And I would edit the local file system, using Visual Studio Code. It was all local. Everything about it was local. So I went digging into how to make this work. And it seems to me that there's several different ways of this happening. Maybe, John, you know better than me. But there's several different ways to do this. But what I landed on, and oh my gosh, it is so cool, is you can, because Visual Studio Code is an Electron app, which 99% of the time stinks. It's really not like the fact that it's Electron. Well, you don't notice it with code, but Electron apps tend to be pretty bad. I'm not going to say anything nasty about 1Password because I donated a lot of money to St. Jude recently, but let's just say that I'm not in love with some of the things that have gone to Electron recently. But code has always been Electron, and I almost never notice. I can from time to time, but it's very rare that I notice. Well, hey, guess what? What is an Electron app really running in behind the scenes? A browser. So what if you hosted this Electron app in a browser? So there's a way that you can run Visual Studio Code from the Visual Studio Code server on the command line. So I can SSH into my Linode box, run a command that starts up a Visual Studio Code server, and then I just load a bespoke URL that it spits out on the command line, and suddenly I'm running a full-bore instance of code. I'm running it in a browser that the browser is running locally, but Visual Studio Code is running on the Linode box, and I'm making my edits. I'm debugging. I'm doing everything on the Linode box. And then I wanted to upload a picture, an image. I thought, oh man, now I'm going to have to SCP it and blah, blah, blah. Well, I wonder what happens if I try to do this in code. Sure enough, I can upload stuff via Visual Studio Code, running in the browser, running against my Linode box. This is the coolest freaking thing I've ever seen. And as much as I love to slag on Electron, and oh boy, do I love to slag on Electron, this is Electron at its finest. It is so freaking cool. And yes, I know there are other ways to do this. I know that you can, mimic your file system via SSH, and you can do all these other sorts of things. But having a full-bore IDE that is, for all intents and purposes, running remotely, but you're interacting with it with a mouse and a keyboard and whatnot, and copy and paste locally, it is so freaking cool. And if you're not familiar with this, you got to look into it because it is amazing. Again, not for everyone. Maybe I have a feeling that neither of you guys are interested in that. And I don't mean that dismissively. Like you're older school, you've been doing this longer, you've done more web stuff than me.
Older school, yeah, I did this already when it was called X Windows.
Fair. Yeah, I take your point, but I don't mean that dismissively. Like I'm not saying this is the best approach for everyone, but holy cow, it was super freaking cool, and I love using it.
What I would suggest though, because the downside of this is you got to run in a browser or whatever. There are lots of I mean, I don't know what they have they might have them for Linux or whatever, but like Visual Studio Code's plugin system is such that there are these beefy plugins that essentially shove a bunch of Node code onto your Linux machine or whatever that runs all sorts of stuff on the Linux machine, but still communicates with your local instance of VS Code.
Yeah, that's what I had initially set out to do, but I must have screwed it up somewhere because that's not where I ended up.
I mean, for what you're doing, you maybe don't need something that heavyweight, but it really depends on it's especially handy if you're running more complicated things. So obviously Visual Studio Code is still running locally, but tons of Node code that is part of the plugin. Like if you go look at what it's shoved, because it's just, the good thing about Node is it's just text files on the file system. It shoves them in there and you can look at what it it threw onto your remote server, and then it's got a language server going, and it's got the debugger server going, and they're talking over the network, and it's like you're doing everything locally, except you get to run Visual Studio Code on your M1 processor while the debugging stuff and everything happens over on the machine where you're debugging. And the experience is similar to using what you're doing in the browser, except that you, in theory, get the advantage of running some stuff on your local machine, which is way faster than the CPU cycles you're getting on a shared server instance.
Oh, totally. Yeah, so here again, the names for all these are so terrible. So like Visual Studio Code, that's fine. That's the general IDE/editor or whatever. I think I have this right. So what I stumbled upon and ended up running and what I've been talking about is Visual Studio Code Server. What I think you're talking about is Visual Studio Code Remote Development, which is what I had set out to use and then ended up just kind of accidentally, accidentally ending up on Visual Studio Code Server. And it's been working pretty darn well for me. It's not perfect by any means, but it works pretty well. So maybe I should try this VS Code Remote Development thing. I'll put links for both of these in the show notes. Again, I'm not trying to say it's for everyone. I'm not trying to say it's for either of you two, but I just thought it was super freaking cool. And oh man, the way that things have progressed over the last 10 years since 15 maybe, since I've been running a Linux server, like it's just all so cool and so slick. And I'm so glad that these tools exist. Like, Tailscale, which admittedly is a sponsor, but I was using them before they sponsored. Linode, I wasn't aware of them until Marco had talked about it. But I chose to use Linode. I'm paying Linode my own money. Like, this is not a sponsorship for them. I'm choosing to do that. So yeah, I mean, this stuff is also cool. And again, I really do appreciate both of your help, but especially Marco sent me a lot of really good tips and tricks and whatnot that really, really saved me a whole ton of time and hopefully a whole lot of, burdensome learning from learning the hard way. So I don't know. I just thought it was super cool.
Tune in 5 years when Casey goes serverless.
Yeah, you never know. Could happen.
See, now my job, now that you've moved into servers my style, I need to leave them now. Now I need to go serverless.
Next thing you know, Marco's going to be running like Docker or Kubernetes or something like that. Weirder things have happened.
I'm trying to get myself out of the server business, not weirdly more into it.
Yeah, you should go serverless.
Yeah, but what does that mean? I feel like that doesn't mean what I think it means. Like, what I think it means is I'm no longer running services. But that's not what that means.
Yeah, well, you're using managed services, most of which do not involve your software running on a persistent server, virtual or otherwise.
Right, which means that they are going to manage their way into taking all of my money.
I mean, part of it is it actually can be cheaper because you're only paying for what you're using. But anyway, you got to get your data.
At my scale, it's very, very, very much not cheaper.
Yeah, but you got to get all. You've talked about this before. You got to get all your data out of your database before you can do stuff like this.
Yeah, I'm currently looking into that. Like I'm so close to just saying F it, I'm going to use CloudKit. But I've just heard so many.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the solution.
I know that's the thing. Like I've hered a lot of mixed things about that, and so I'm not.
But DynamoDB, maybe look into that. Put that in a Google search.
I need to really do some soul searching here and figure out, like, do I really want to be running what I'm running now? Like the other day. Normally, my servers are very stable, and they normally need very little babysitting. Like I just went.
This sounds like a Casey setup if I've ever heard one.
I know.
Oh my goodness!
Like I just went on this wedding weekend. Right, I was traveling for almost a week. Between various family events surrounding it, and at no time did my servers need any attention whatsoever, except when I first arrived upstate. When I'm upstate. In middle of nowhere, no cell reception and everything. I start unpacking my stuff. My laptop gets on Wi-Fi, and it starts exploding with alerts. I'm like, what is going on? And for some reason, out of the blue, on a random weekday, my primary database server is having extreme high load, and everything it's maxing out its connection limit, and connections are dropping, and things are failing, and it's what is going on? I spend the next, 15, 20 minutes trying to figure out what's going on, trying to alleviate it, start shutting down non-essential, services and stuff so I can, let it recover a little bit. And eventually, I shut some stuff down for a little while, like, again, non-essential stuff. The load eventually, it started to come down. I'm like, you know what, just in case, let me reboot it. It's already barely working. I might as well reboot it, take the downtime, and, maybe it'll come back up in a better state. So I rebooted it. Comes back up, still under a very heavy load for the first 10 minutes, way past like cache warm up kind of time, and then the load just falls back down, and it fixes itself, and I re-enable all the non-essential services, and everything just goes back to normal. I'm like, what the hell was that? Like I still have no idea what it was.
You have insufficient monitoring.
I looked at all the monitoring, and I'm like, there was not an increase in traffic. There was not an increase in like reported even memory usage. Like it's like I have no clue what that was. That never happens. except, oh, it just happened like in the middle of, or in the beginning of this vacation I'm trying to take, like, and again, normally this is, but like, this is the kind of stuff, like the amount of stress that brought me and like, you know, intrusion into my life that brought me, I'm like, you know what can I do to reduce my reliance on this kind of stuff? Like how can I design my service in such a way that I'm lightening the load on the servers?
Yeah, but if it was CloudKit, you wouldn't even be able to do the things that you did.
That's true.
See, that's the problem.
That's true. And I've heard so many things about, you know, like what happens with like random Apple ID signouts. Like I still like I actually do use CloudKit in the app. It's just for a very insignificant part of the app. It's the part where when you first log into a brand new installation of Overcast, it checks for a list of your accounts that you've used in the past. That list, which is basically a list of like login tokens, is stored in CloudKit. So it says, you know, whatever your Apple ID is, like here's the accounts I know about you. Because you know, I'm trying to not use email and password for most accounts. So like they're mostly just anonymous tokens, and CloudKit, they're stored in CloudKit, so they're associated with your Apple ID. I get so many weird crash reports from that screen, from like random CloudKit, you know, record, you know, deep into the stack trace where my app is nowhere to be found. Random crash reports. Like, this is the simplest possible use of this thing.
The data volume is not high.
Right. Right. Like, it's, so that's why I think like I don't necessarily know if I want to do that, but there's also, you know, there's a lot of things in between, you know, CloudKit and what I'm currently doing, which is like a fairly heavy database setup.
Yeah. I'm gonna pitch you to move away from relational for most of your stuff. I think a lot of your data, especially the vast majority of your data, I would imagine, is not actually relational. So you could get away with a scalable document store with a managed service and a scalable document store that will let you sleep much better at night and keep the relational stuff into a basically fixed size, smaller relational thing with a good cache in front of it, and that will really alleviate your problems at the price of making you learn AWS.
That's a big price.
It's a big price.
Well, and not to mention the big price of actually paying for it.
I think you could absolutely run your service for like 1/8 of the money, but finding that solution, again, it's an RPG. It's going to be a quest. But absolutely, you could maybe cut it down by, you know, an order of magnitude. It's just a question of finding the right arrangement. And then, by the way, rewriting your whole app to work with that. Haha.
Right, but, you know, there's a lot of options between that. Like, you know, because this is inherently, I mean, what it used to be called like shardable or partitionable, like, you know, you don't need a lot of cross-user data access. So because of that, like, there are better things I could be doing.
Right, but you don't need that to be relational at all. And once you give that up, there are these easy managed scalable data stores that cost pennies on the dollar of what you're paying for this monster MySQL instance, even if you sharded it. That's fair. But when I look at them, a lot of them, they'll charge like per read or write, or, you know, there's some other gotcha in the pricing that would kill me. They're cheaper than you think. But anyway, it's a big project. I'm not making this, it's not easy, but there is a solution out there. I'm pretty confident. It's just a question of how much effort do you want to put into that and how much money you're going to save on it. Yeah.
But honestly, like, anything that I do to massively re-architect how I'm storing stuff to reduce my server dependence, CloudKit really is something to seriously consider, because I'm already tied to Apple IDs with my anonymous logins. I'm already using it. And so if I can figure out how to, you know, deal with its monsters, I would much rather go that direction and have I'd still have servers for things like feed crawling, but my ideal outcome would be that my servers contain no user data, that the user data is all in CloudKit, and that my servers are only doing public data, like the feed index.
CloudKit is the obvious solution if it wasn't for all the horror stories I hear about it. And the complete powerlessness that you have.
Well, and to be fair, like, I wouldn't do their magical, like, we're going to sync your database for you, like connect core data to CloudKit, like that.
Oh, that I've heard horrible things about. Yeah.
But I mean, the problem is always like, hey, it's not working, and we have no visibility into why, and we can't do anything about it to fix. Right. And in some ways that's refreshing. It's like, well, it's not my problem, but it kind of is your problem, because now your users can't use your app, and all you can say is, it's not working and there's nothing I can do about it. No user wants to hear that from the developer of their app.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, if I design it right and the failure case is like, I can't get your data to sync back to CloudKit, well, most of my users only use it on one device. So if the sync is not working well for them in some edge case context, that actually might not matter to most of my users.
That's not going to be the failure mode. The failure mode is going to be, like you said, some crash deep inside some CloudKit API. You're like, how could that ever crash? It's like, well, it is. And every time I launch my app and try to play, it instantly crashes. So there's only so much you can do with, defensive programming to not make that happen. Because it's like, look, if I have to call this API to check for a thing and that crashes, it takes down my whole app.
Or it's like some background thread throwing an exception, like, well, I can't do anything about that.
Right. It's not your code. It's not your code at all. You don't have the source code to it. You can't fix it. You don't know why it's crashing. That's the worst situation to be in for something as critical to your app. And that's why people get frustrated, not because it's unreliable or bad. It's very reliable and very good. But when it does have a problem, you feel completely powerless because you don't have the source. It's not your stuff. You don't control the server side. You don't control the client side. You don't control anything about it.
But can't you say a lot of that same stuff about managed services?
Kind of, but managed services, like, there's something you can do about it. Even though they are managed, first of all, there's managed and unmanaged versions of everything. And so worst case scenario, if the managed service is not working for you, you can just take it and go to the unmanaged version of it. And second, they're not as opaque as Apple. Like, even if it's just as simple as like, hey, it's an open source product. So like you actually do have the source code and can run a local instance of it and can try to reproduce the crash or whatever. Like, you can't do that with CloudKit. It's not open source. They're not using, they probably are using open source things behind the scenes, but like you don't have access to it in the same way as even the quote unquote proprietary things that are running in public clouds.
See, right now, look, I just checked my status page. Nothing's been going on. Everything's been fine. And for some reason, my replica databases in my main cluster are behind by like 8 minutes. Like they're normally, 0 seconds behind. Sometimes they fall behind by 8 minutes, or some, who knows why?
You're running on the ragged edge of what this hardware can handle for you, and what could it be? Who knows?
But I'm not. The replicas are doing almost nothing. They're only replicating the writes.
Somebody's doing something. They could be contending for a latch inside the MySQL replication code or some crap.
No, this is
annoying to deal with stuff.
MySQL 8. This is what's driving me. MySQL 8 is going to make me leave servers. Like that's like. That's going to make me quit the business. This stuff never happened with MySQL 5. Ever. This never happened.
It could be worse. Could be Oracle.
That's true.
There's so many things that can go wrong inside these databases.
Oh my god. I need to get out of this business. Like this is the kind of problem. This is infuriating. Like what can I do about this? Nothing. I wonder what'll happen first. Will I switch to Postgres or stop running servers?
I'm not entirely sure Postgres is going to solve your problem here.
Yeah, I have no experience with it whatsoever. Like, and everyone always tells me how like the Postgres people say it's amazing.
Oh, it is. I love it. It's my favorite database. Oh, no contest. I think I've used all the major current relational databases. Postgres is by far my favorite. But when you push any database, you start to need to either become or have a database guru who can figure out how to get your thing to scale the way you want it. But at least Postgres, I feel like Postgres is consistent and understandable, unlike, let's say, Oracle. Just maybe understandable to some people, definitely not consistent. And there's not so many dark corners. But Postgres, in my experience, because of that, it's straightforward. But and you'll get the straightforward scaling you expect. You'll be like, yeah, but what if I want it to be better? And it's like, nope, this is the way it goes. I can explain to you why it's this way, and it will be consistently this way. It's like, yeah, but I wish it was better or faster in some way. It's like, get a bigger server? and MySQL is like, we can be super fast and most of the time until something goes wrong, and then who knows what's going on. So I feel like Postgres would give you worse performance in a more consistent way.
This is like, my favorite database engine by far, frickin' SQLite. It never gives me problems. The only thing is it can't do this. Like it
cannot scale. Did I tell you this time when I was messing with SQLite? I use it as my toy database thing for stuff at work, and I was trying to do like a scale test on it. And let me tell you, once you get a few million rows into SQLite, it falls over. I mean, it's not what it's for, but it falls over hard.
I mean, it's incredible at a lot of things, and it can do high traffic on smaller stuff for sure. But it's not made for like a right. It's not made for like a client server thing where you have a whole bunch of server processes. It can't do that.
It can't do concurrency. But even with just a single user, you get millions of rows into SQLite. It says no. It just falls over. Performance goes off a cliff, and it's that's not what it's for.
Yeah, but man, I love it because it never gives me problems. Like, because really, when you look at like what I'm running, like I'm running, a very large server side MySQL installation, a few of them actually, a few different clusters doing different things, and then on all of my client side app installations, that's all against SQLite, and the servers are basically just syncing changes between your different instances of SQLite between your different devices, and so I would say Overcast is, in a way, more dependent on SQLite than on anything else.
Yeah, just in a distributed way. It's not. Imagine if you had to run one SQLite database that was equivalent to all your distributed ones. That would be bad. That's what you're doing with MySQL.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly, and that's why I have some changes I'm brainstorming of like how do I dig myself out of this hole. But it involves getting rid of the table that associates users' progress of individual episodes as individual rows of the table.
Yeah.
It turns out that's a really big table.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I'm looking at document stores, because there's like some data that is just not relational. It's just a bucket of data for users, and putting that in one table is just making like this monster table is going to eat you.
So I captured these numbers the other day when I was trying to figure out what to do. The table that maps what you've subscribed to, so it's basically users to feeds. So it's every row is like user ID, feed ID, and then some options, whatever your options are for that subscription. That table is 3 gigs. The table that maps users to episodes, 450 gigs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my word, Mark.
And most of that is indexes.
271 gigs of the 450 is index.
There you go.
And so I'm like, all right, so my current one option I'm thinking of is a new table that would replace the feed subscription table and would have basically a binary column on the end of it. That would be a packed binary form of your item.
Why? No.
Just take all this data and throw it into a document store in AWS and see how fast it is to query one user's worth of data. It's so fast, you never have to worry about scaling. It's just, oh God.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be funny. You've never really messed with like a MongoDB or something like that, have you?
No,
that's not what I would suggest. But
well, okay, so I don't know enough about it either. Then, but what would you suggest?
I mean, I was saying, look at Dynamo, look at Cassandra. Like, there's lots of options, but I'm just saying, like, you don't need this. It's the same reason you get away with having the local SQL data. This is not like it's relational within itself, but within all your users, there's no relation between them. So these are tiny little islands of data. So you want something that divides these up, and sharding by user.
Well, there's some relation in the sense that I do have to do some cross-user queries that I would have to restructure. So, for instance, there's a few things in Overcast that are based on the number of recent recommendations or stars that you've gotten.
You got, but that's like batch job stuff.
Yeah, but I would have to like branch that out and like maybe have a separate table that is relational for like recently starred episodes among everybody, and then I could query that really quickly or something like that. Like I would still have to branch out some of those things, mostly stars. But for the most part, I don't need to do a lot of aggregate queries against everyone's data on this certain thing. I gotta freaking figure out how to make CloudKit work and get myself out of this business.
Yeah, what's going to happen, though, is you're going to do that, and then it's going to break catastrophically one time, even if for but 10 minutes, and then you're going to throw all that out the window, and then next thing you know, you're going to be using...
No, he'll have rewritten the entire client app and the whole server side by then, so he's not going to be able to throw it out.
No. Then what he'll do is, because have you met Marco? He really likes to control everything. And so what you'll end up doing is doing like a Cassandra, DynamoDB or something. Maybe it's not AWS, maybe it's something else, but you'll end up doing something else that is at least reducing your reliance on MySQL. Maybe it's Postgres, who knows?
I still think my binary episodes data thing has some legs.
When there should be a alarm should sound when you're thinking of using binary columns to pack data into a relational database. Someone should come to your house and say, "Stop! What are you doing?" So what decade do you think this is?